In the pre-release Theon chapter from The Winds of Winter, he tells Stannis that Roose Bolton is sending some of his men to attack. Stannis declares that this is a blunder, that Roose could simply sit there in Winterfell and wait for Stannis' army to starve and freeze. Now, Stannis doesn't know why Roose made this bad decision, but he's happy to capitalize on it. He's more focused on how to take advantage of the situation than he is curious about why Roose is making an inexplicable strategic mistake. But we know why. At least we have all the pieces to figure it out, because unlike Stannis, we get a number of chapters inside Winterfell. Stannis is left to wonder what's happening in there, but we get a first-hand look at it through Theon. And that's our subject of our episode today. Now, Stannis makes it sound easy, right? He says, all they got to do is sit there. They could just relax in Winterfell, let the weather do the job for them, claim the victory for them. But as Stannis' army deals with the cold, the heat is turned up for Roose and his allies inside Winterfell. And I'm not just referring to those really nice vents that they get the hot water from. No, we're talking a different type of heat. A significant measure of this tension, that's the kind of heat we're talking about, is straightforward enough. A lot of the Northerners really don't like the Freys. Everyone knows about the Red Wedding, and many of Roose's allies in quotes, lost men there. So it's personal. It's more than personal. Only fear of Roose Bolton keeps them in line. But soon after the wedding of Ramsay to their Arya Stark imposter Jane Poole, bodies start appearing. One death, then another, and more after that. With each frozen corpse, it becomes apparent that the Boltons may not have quite the level of control over the situation as it first appeared. With that, the fear of Bolton ebbs and shifts to this unknown element, this unknown factor, this unknown faction. Who's doing this? They, of course, fear Stannis, but they're not sure. And this escalates. Fear of Roose starts to become maybe balanced or exceeded by the fear of Stannis. And it worsens. This escalates even further as the inhabitants start to wonder if they might be the next body discovered in the snow. As Roose and Ramsay's firm hold on the situation begins to become a lot less firm and even starts to slip, their unhappy allies begin to feel more and more comfortable pushing back a little, saying what's on their mind, less afraid of consequences. Fear doesn't keep people in line when something else is even more scary. Roose may have taken it for granted that no one is scarier than him. He might have thought, well, surely I'm the scariest on the block. Well, maybe not, Roose. Meanwhile, maybe others or one person use this chaos, uncertainty, and confusion with the bodies to advance their own agendas, unrelated to Stannis versus Roose. So this episode is part whodunit, but even more so, why do it? We'll examine the suspects. While we're pretty sure who the murderers are in each case, we'll build up to that. The characters in the story don't, save the perpetrators themselves, of course, but it's also clear that there are multiple murderers, and they don't necessarily know each other. So the Winterfell Murders, as we're calling them, are the impetus for turning the tide against the Boltons and Freys in favor of Stannis and the Northerners who wish to restore the Starks. One of the best parts about it is Stannis has no idea or little idea it's happening. All the stuff is happening that helps him, and he has no idea why. So the events in this episode are going to lead to the upcoming battle or battles of ice, and before that, the Pink Letter. And of course, all of this will tie into whatever happens at the Wall with regard to Jon's stabbing, Selyse and the Queen's Men, Val, Shireen, Patchface, Melisandre, all that. So many plot lines. This is what reminds us that the North and the Wall are incredibly active in A Dance with Dragons. There's so much happening and it interacts with each other. The plot lines overlap a bit while winter hangs over everything. So it really does pay for us to look at these major intertwined plot lines individually, because it's just so much to take all at once. Even if you've read it a few times, you can miss a lot, even if you get the gist of it. So we've got Theon and Jane Poole, Roose and Ramsay, Stannis and the Spearwives led by Mance disguised as Abel, Freys and Manderlys, Snow and Suspicion. All that and more on this episode of History of Westeros podcast. Hello and welcome back to History of Westeros podcast. I'm Aziz. With me, as always, is Ashaya. We have a good one for you today. I always say that because I always think our episodes are good, and hopefully you do too. We are here most Sundays at 3 p.m. Eastern on YouTube doing our live streams. And you can always find the edited versions later on Spotify or on any podcast platform that you use. And if you listen on Patreon, you can get the episodes ad-free. This episode was chosen during Topics Moot 2025, which is our now a yearly, we've done it twice now, session or event where our patrons vote on a variety of topics that we present. And the topics that get the most votes get made into episodes. First year we did 12. This year we did 16. And this is number 10 of that 16. So here in July, we've already gotten through well past the halfway point. And y'all picked some great ones. I've had so much fun writing these and researching them. And we've got a lot more coming too. There's 6 more after this one. All right. So a good shout out to Nina, goodqueenally.tumblr.com. She is kicking butt as usual over there, taking questions, taking names, all that. So yeah, make sure to check her out. And if you have questions for us, obviously, you can hit us up if you're here live in the comments, but if not, you can message us at westeroshistory@gmail.com. Discord, Facebook, X, we're on everything. Blue Sky, we're on all the sites. Some we use more than others, but you can always hit us up on any of them. Super chat from Sam Jensen says, hope y'all are doing good. I just got a little black kitten and had to name her Koja. Hope she has the OG Koja's approval. Oh, that's fantastic. We, of course, have a cat named Koja as well. We were very happy to hear that there's another Koja out there. So, yes, we absolutely approve.
Yeah, I said that we want to see a photo.
Yes.
So if you're in our Discord or Facebook group or just want to send us an email, I would love to see a picture of little Koja. Our Koja is Koja Mew.
Koja Mew, that's right. Of course, that is from Koja Mo of the Cinnamon Wind fame in Feast for Crows. Our trivia question for the day. You all will hear the answer subtly or maybe not so subtly at some point during the episode. I'm going to say it, but I will reveal it specifically at the end. One of Mance's so-called washerwomen is named Willow, but what's her nickname? It's kind of a cool one. Let's hear the different sections that we'll be discussing today, and then we'll get right to it. We got setup, which includes fear and loathing in Winterfell. And yeah, we like to make references, and here's another one on my shirt. I've got, it's always bloody in Winterfell. It's always bloody in Winterfell. We're big fans of It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, and this is a bloody Winterfell episode. That fits.
You did get a compliment on it in the chat already.
Heck yeah. Sunny coming back soon, too. We're excited for season 17.
Yeah, it is coming back so soon, in a couple days.
Yeah, that's right. Pretty exciting. So this is a big document. Next up is First Blood, then Second and Third Blood, then Fourth Blood, then The Hooded Man, then Jane, it rhymes with airplane. Culprits, our quote of the week, pointing the finger, and then outro. That's right. Yeah, I said this is a long document. It's about 25 pages. A usual length is more like 20, so we'll see what that means in terms of length. That's what she said. Let's start with fear and loathing in Winterfell. In Reek 3, right, the third Reek chapter of A Dance with Dragons, which is the last chapter called Reek, it switches naming conventions after that, Roose decides that Ramsay should marry Arya, Jane Poole, of course, in Winterfell, instead of at Barrowton. That was the original plan. And he sends out word to the Northern Lords, right? And then we can move ahead. There's not much else that's relevant to the Winterfell murders in that chapter. The next Theon chapter is the Prince of Winterfell. So that's the naming convention change. Off screen, in between these chapters, we know that Wyman Manderlys kills Rhaegar, Jared, and Simon Frey on the road and puts them into the wedding pies. So the wedding happens. Other lords and ladies arrive with Abel, Bael the Bard, of course. Abel is an anagram for Bael the Bard. And of course, what did Bael do? He stole a daughter of Winterfell, which is exactly what Abel was planning on doing with his 6 washerwomen who are actually spear wives. And that kind of undersells how badass they are. Anyway, Bael, of course, is Mance Rayder. The women are Holly, Frenya, Squirrel, Willow, Rowan, and Myrtle. It's a quote from Abel. He says, 2 sisters, 2 daughters, 1 wife, and my old mother. But Theon notices that none of them look like him at all. Theon thinks that Abel is more of a pander than a musician. Pander meaning pimp, basically. And he thinks that washerwomen is just a polite term. for camp follower, and camp follower is just a polite term for whore. But his suspicions don't go any farther than that. He's like, well, this person isn't who he says he is, but he doesn't suspect, Mance Raider or murderer. It's just like, yeah, whatever, this guy, it's just marketing from his perspective. He's like, yeah, he calls them his daughters just because. So others probably noticed that too, like the hair color and the look. He's probably not the only one to notice that, but who cares, right? They're just lowborn. He's a singer. They don't care. So, but that's in part going to make them more welcome when people realize, oh, he's a pander. Oh, most of the men in the castle are happy to have some other women around for sex work. That makes them welcome, right? So then the wedding happens, then the feast, the pies are served, and it's amazing and gross all at once. Then we get the Turncloak chapter. This is where it starts to heat up a little bit, but not quite all the way. We've had Manderlys pulling off secret revenge plots, but what about everybody else? This is the chapter where George sets the mood for Winterfell that's going to continue through the rest of the book and into TWOW, as we can tell by the TWOW Theon chapter. It's a mood of mistrust that continues to escalate with each successive chapter. As a way to boost morale, Roose Bolton declares that these overwhelming winter storms are a sign that the old gods want Stannis gone from the north because he doesn't belong there. It seems to work on the Northerners. They appreciate that sentiment. They loudly and boisterously agree. But look how this lands with his allies. Quote,
Theon Greyjoy did not join the uproar. Neither did the men of House Frey, he did not fail to note. They are strangers here as well, he thought, watching Ser Aenys Frey and his half-brother Ser Hosteen. Born and bred in the Riverlands, the Freys had never seen a snow like this. The North has already claimed 3 of their blood, Theon thought, recalling the men that Ramsay had searched for fruitlessly, lost between White Harbor and Barrowton.
Their missing cousins have the Freys suspicious, and the gap between the two cultures has a big old wedge shoved in it as the snows keep falling. While the Northerners seem nonplussed, the Riverlands are, quote, aghast at the snow. And yeah, this is just a fundamental flaw in Roose's coalition here. By praising the Northerners and calling Stannis an outsider, he's kind of isolating his allies. But at the same time, what are they going to do? They're not just going to leave. So it's a bit of a balancing act, and as we'll see, well, Roose isn't able to keep that balance. There's too much else going on, especially when people are trying to push him off balance. So this plays out during breakfast, this scene that we just had the quote from. And Rowan, one of the Spearwives, approaches Theon and tries to win him over a bit. She flirts, tries to get him to dance or at least smile. He's, of course, not interested in any of that. So instead, she changes tactics, goes for flattery, and asks him, how did you manage to pull off the capture of this whole castle with only 50 men? That's really impressive. Stannis can't even take it with 5,000. Stannis doesn't have 5,000. But still, that's the point, is she's trying to inflate his ego, trying to win him over, right? Just trying a couple different tactics to get information out of him. He's, of course, very suspicious of everybody. I mean, he's been traumatized horribly by Ramsay. He doesn't trust anything or anyone hardly. There's almost nothing he's not suspicious of. So this is not going to work. Theon correctly figures out that it's some kind of ploy. But, of course, his default is that it's Ramsay. Ramsay is testing him again. So that's his first instinct, and we understand why. This is where his trauma takes his brain. But the actual ploy is rescuing who they think is Arya. And he doesn't even... At first, he doesn't fathom that possibility. No one, why would he, right? So he leaves. He's like, I don't want to talk to this girl. I'm out of here. He goes to the Heart Tree to be alone and to pray. He doesn't know what to ask for, though. So he asks the old gods to save him. And he hears sobbing. And it's really creepy. Quote.
Snow fell around him, pale and silent, keeping its own counsel. The only sound was a faint, soft sobbing. Jane, he thought. It is her, sobbing in her bridal bed. Who else could it be? Gods do not weep, or do they? The sound was too painful to endure. Theon grabbed hold of a branch and pulled himself back to his feet, knocked the snow off his legs, and limped back toward the lights. There are ghosts in Winterfell, he thought, and I am one of them.
You may have noticed something a little suspicious about this. How could Theon possibly hear Jane from her room when he's in the Godswood, which is 3 acres in size, by the way? So if you notice that, good catch, because that does seem suspicious. Maybe it's just in his head, but either way, it's telling. It might be a supernatural thing going on here. He's at the heart tree, and there's not nearly the weirdest thing that happens in front of this heart tree, even in these series of Theon chapters. He hears his name, right? And another time there's other things he hears. So it's not quite related to the murders in Winterfell, but just let's remember that as we're going through this, that there's a number of things in these Theon chapters where he's not quite there, or he's not sure what's happening, and he doesn't process it properly. But as readers, we can think about the possibility of the supernatural. If Bran is seeing through the werewood or something like that. He then returns to the hall after his time at the heart tree, and sobbing and hearing that. It's like, well, this isn't exactly making him feel better. It says it was too painful to endure the sound, so he's like, well, that's not helping. So he goes back to the hall to eat and drink. He's going to have some ale, make himself a little drunk. That'll take some of the edge off. And that's when Lady Dustin approaches him. And he just can't be left alone, right? And she wants to get the location of the crypt from him. She's like, where's the crypt? My men have been looking for it. They can't find it. You probably know where it is. He's like, yeah, I know where it is. So he takes her there, and that's the rest of the chapter. The rest of that chapter is them in there, and it ends with her saying, Roose has trained you well, where she says, don't talk about what I said, which is probably the opposite of what she wants. She wants what she said to get back to him indirectly. And more relevantly, she points out how Ramsay's treatment of Arya is undermining the whole Bolton scheme and their alliance. Quote,
Lady Arya's sobs do us more harm than all of Lord Stannis' swords and spears. If the bastard means to remain Lord of Winterfell, he had best teach his wife to laugh.
So yet another problem added to the stew of unease in the castle, right? We got Northerners upset with other Northerners, and tension building about Stannis, but it's really just starting. This is the beginning of the tension. What's interesting here about this is at least one thing the Freys can't be blamed for. It's not their fault that Ramsay is tormenting Jane. Now, Theon suspects Lady Dustin knows the girl isn't Arya. I'm personally 99% sure of that. At one point, she even says, dressing her in gray and white won't help, blah, blah, blah. It's like she's kind of hinting that it's no good to make people think she's a Stark if you're going to treat her less than a Stark. You have to revere the Starks. That's kind of the whole point here. You got to treat her well. But Ramsay is Ramsay. And Roose is Roose. He's not telling Ramsay the things that Lady Dustin is saying. He probably should say that. He said, look, you're making her loud. It's hurting the morale of our troops, but I don't know if Roose even processes that. And maybe he thinks it's a good thing for their fear angle. Let's not forget, too, that Lady Hornwood, there's Hornwood men there. Remember what Ramsay did to her? Locked her in a tower, and they found her with her fingers bitten off, which they assumed was because she was starving, but we know better. We know it's because Theon describes the pain of having a flayed finger is so severe that he bit his own. He wanted to bite it off, which is probably what she did. So the Hornwood men are like, every time Arya cries, which is a lot, they're going to think of what Ramsay did to their lady. It's going to upset them. It's going to upset them that that he's gotten away with it so far. And Lady Hornwood was born a Manderly. That was her family she was born into. So the Manderly men, I mean, they already have a reason to want to kill Ramsay, and they've already killed 3 of them. So they're like, well, we've already started. Let's go. Let's get some more. But that just, again, another reason for them to be upset. But this is, so there's just a long list of grievances that Roose is trying to keep under wraps by saying, well, you're more afraid of me than you are willing to try to take revenge. You can almost see what he's doing. He had to know the Freys would be unpopular in the north. Roose is too smart to not realize that. So what he's doing is he's like, they know I committed some crimes. They know I've done evil to the Starks, but they hate the Freys way more than me. So as long as he can keep them as like a buffer, yeah, they take all the heat. The other Northerners focus their anger on his allies, the Freys, his in-laws, rather than him, which, for a guy like Roose, that's perfectly fine. Although there is a severe downside to that, as we'll see, and Ramsay won't see, or Roose won't see coming. So he's also faced with the problem of Ramsay, who is making Arya cry. It's like, well, maybe they don't hate the Freys as much as they hate the Boltons if he keeps doing this, or at least it'll become more even. So, yeah. There's another way this can backfire, too, is if the Freys are beaten, if they're defeated, Roose loses his biggest ally and his scapegoat. He no longer can scapegoat them, subtly or indirectly. So Abel and crew are going to take actions that create distractions to enable their escape. Mostly, they're going to help people in the castle who hate each other to hate each other even more. They're going to encourage that hatred amongst the different factions. Mostly, this is everyone hating the Freys. They can encourage that. It's easy to encourage that. But this changes the vibe from everyone hates the Freys to everyone suspects everyone, and no one cares that everyone hates the Freys. No sympathy for the Freys, but we still want to know who's murdering people around here, because not all the targets are Freys. So the Freys expect outrage. They're like, why aren't you more mad on our behalf? And mostly the Northerners are like, because we don't like you. Why do you think? It just further isolates them and feeds their unease. So they're the first ones to feel really paranoid. Paranoid? Paranoid. And their paranoia is justified, though. It's another case of just because you're paranoid doesn't mean they're not after you. They are. It's like, everyone's out to get us. Yeah, correct. They are. They don't like you. They really don't like you. So that, in turn, spreads. You've got one group that's paranoid and off-put and just worried about what everybody else thinks of them correctly, and that's going to lower the overall morale, because some of the other lords are like, these are our allies? This guys? Can we even count on them? Everyone hates them. How useful are they really? They're not even Northerners. Can they even handle the snow? Like, isn't this just going to ruin them? Like, aren't they worthless in this? Those kind of thoughts might occur to a lot of these Southerners. These Northerners about the Southerners. So it starts to seep into their confidence even more. And that fear of Stannis starts to creep in as a stronger element. The fear of what's outside, coupled with the fact that it's getting increasingly dangerous inside, pours prodigious fuel on the paranoia fire. So, yeah, like, if I was a Northerner in Roose's army, I would be like, these guys? This is who we're relying on to beat Stannis? They're afraid of Stannis. Are they going to look at the Freys and go, yeah, we'll get him with the Freys, will take out Stannis? I don't think they would have that level of confidence. I think they might be like, Stannis could beat these guys, The very next chapter is the King's Prize chapter, which is, of course, an Asha chapter. She has something of a parallel realization. Each side imagines the other side is in better shape than they are. You see, that's how fear works. The Winterfell men think Stannis could be on them at any point. He could be right here. He could be right outside. We wouldn't even see him. But in reality, Asha's like, we can't even march. We're so snowbound, we literally can't leave where we are right now. Meanwhile, they're worried that Bolton could come at them at any moment. But he's not. He doesn't want to, at least not at first. He's like, no, I'm going to stay here and let Stannis' army die. That's a good strategy. It just happens to not work out for reasons he couldn't have seen coming. So in reality, neither of them are mobile. They both are worried about the other being mobile, and neither of them are. But Stannis is plotting, or getting help plotting, both really, to get them moving right into his trap. Now, I'm talking about the rank and file, the opinions of everyday soldiers, not necessarily the leadership, like people who have less information. But also, this is going to seep into the leadership too. You got to wonder, like, what is Roose Bolton thinking as things slowly slip out of his grasp? He thinks he had everything in control so well, it starts to not be that way. Got to wonder what's on his mind. Roose is bound to what his men think. He can't just absolutely order them around. He knows that his hold on a lot of these houses is slender because of how much they hate him. So perception is reality, unless he can convince them otherwise, which he's been trying to do. But it's getting harder and harder for Roose to convince them that they're doing well. Yeah, at first they're like, yeah, we're doing great. And then as events transpire, it starts to slip. They're like, yeah, maybe we're not doing so great after all. And this opens them up to the reverse manipulation. While Roose is trying to convince them that they're winning, these other elements within the castle are sending the opposite message through their actions, like showing how little control Roose has. The murders begin. Roose can't solve them. Yeah, you should be worried. Your leader isn't able to handle this. Now consider how well, if he can't even handle this, how can he handle Stannis? And the Freys, of course, as worried as Roose is getting, the Freys, as worried as they are, it has to increase even more. Now, of course, we haven't seen the final result yet, but we know it worked. We know that they did send the Freys out, or Roose does send the Freys and the Manderlys out to attack. And it's as much to defray the tension inside the castle as it is to win the war. And this is the thing that Stannis will call a blunder. But Stannis doesn't realize how perilous the situation in Winterfell has gotten. So there's a lot of people taking advantage of the situation inside Winterfell, and that's what we'll be going over. There's a lot of deaths in these chapters. While Roose and the Freys and others are looking for a culprit, we can say for a certainty that there is more than one culprit. So they're already missing an important element here. They're looking for one culprit or one faction of culprits when it's almost certainly not. So already they're behind the 8 ball on that one. And if I'm wrong and Roose suspects there's multiple murderers or multiple factions murdering, he doesn't want to say that out loud. That sounds even worse. People are going to get even more afraid. I mean, they're already afraid. If they find out that there's actually several groups murdering people inside the castle, that's going to make it way worse. So, everyone's a suspect at that point. So that's really scary. So he's not going to let on to that notion even if he's figured it out. It's kind of a strange irony of how we perceive numbers, right? 0, that stands alone. 1, that stands alone. But 2 becomes 2 or more, right? If you suspect nobody, then that's nobody. If you suspect one person, that's one person. But once you suspect multiples, you don't know if it's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, right? It gets, and that makes it scarier because your brain runs with that. You don't know how many they are. Without that certainty, your brain fills in the information, and the information is going to be fearful because that's the overall vibe. So as the situation drags on, with no culprits apprehended, of course, it's going to get worse and worse and worse. The people in charge aren't solving it. They can't seem to stop the killings. Yeah. So let's get into the specifics of the murders. First blood. Yes. Though several deaths prior to this chapter are quite relevant, the first murder to take place in Winterfell since the rebuilding is the first thing we hear in the next Theon chapter, which is the Ghost of Winterfell, or Ghost in Winterfell. Quote,
"The dead man was found at the base of the inner wall, with his neck broken and only his left leg showing above the snow that had buried him during the night. If Ramsay's bitches had not dug him up, he might have stayed buried till spring. By the time Ben Bones pulled them off, Grey Jane had eaten so much of the dead man's face that half the day was gone before they knew for certain who he'd been. A man-at-arms of 44 years who had marched north with Roger Riswell."
"A drunk,"
Riswell declared.
"Pissing off the wall, I'll wager. He slipped and fell."
No one disagreed, but Theon Greyjoy found himself wondering why any man would climb the snow-slick steps to the battlements in the black of night just to take a piss.
So as fear escalates, so do the weak excuses or the weak cover stories for these. Theon is our main point of understanding for that. Theon's like, yeah, that doesn't make much sense. And if he can figure it out just simply like that, surely others are. It's a bad excuse. It's a tough question, right? It's a killer question, really. It kills the theory entirely. Theon can't be nearly the only one who noticed. No one disagreed because they're afraid. They're not going to disagree with Roger Riswell. They don't want to say things that cause morale to drop because that might get answered violently by the people in charge. Like if you're messing with the morale of all our army, it doesn't matter if you're telling the truth or not. You need to shut up, and they might kill you to keep you quiet. This is Roose Bolton. They might take your tongue or something like that. They aren't messing with that. Just like they're afraid to question that it's really Arya, right? These are the similar lies. Or they're afraid to question the outrageous story that the Freys concocted about Robb Stark turning into a wolf and eating people at the Red Wedding, right? Manderly couldn't challenge them on that. Davos did, because he's like, what is going on here? Why is everybody believing this story? But that's why they're afraid to disagree. It's not that they actually believe that, So Theon listens to he hears people muttering, he hears people talking, whispering. He gets a lot of the vibe of the castle. One says, Stannis must have friends in the castle. See, fear running rampant. They're like, Stannis, he's got agents in here. He doesn't. He has people that are working kind of alongside him, but no one that Stannis sent there. No one that Stannis gave direct orders to. But they're close enough to the truth because there are people who are working towards things that will help Stannis. But another guy responds and says, Stannis is probably frozen in. Maybe he's run off. And another responds, Stannis could be 5 feet outside our walls and we wouldn't see him. So yeah, people are talking. They're getting less quiet about what they're saying. As more and more people share their sentiments, more and more people are going to talk to each other about that. So you got people expressing the worst case scenario, that Stannis has men inside. Another makes a reasonable point about the snow, but they're wrong because Stannis is Stannis. He'll break before he bends, etc. And the third is worried that the storm might actually help Stannis, which isn't true, but maybe it will. Maybe it will kind of with the ice trap if that's what happens. But anyway, the point here is just how this is an example of morale deteriorating, the mind wondering and wandering about what might happen, and it defaults to fear. So this is immediately followed up by old Lord Locke saying the storm is proof that they are cursed. He's directly refuting what Roose said prior about the storm is proof that the gods want Stannis gone. Old Lord Locke is saying, no, we're the cursed ones here. We're the ones doing wrong. We're snowed in. The gods are mad at us. But a Dreadfort man is like, no, that's ridiculous. He backs his lord and says, Stannis is the one cursed. What are you talking about? So they're kind of arguing a bit. You can see how it's already fallen apart. Then a free rider says, hey, maybe Stannis' red god priestess can melt the snows. Ramsay and his men toss that guy over the battlements. Exactly the point I was making earlier. You cannot speak out loud things that will reduce morale. It's so important to have a high morale when you're going into battle, and anything that ebbs and takes that away is super dangerous. So they not only kill this man, they make sure everyone sees it. They made an example out of this guy. They throw him out into the snow and shot arrows at him. And he broke his leg, like he almost certainly died. But sticking to the point, this violates the principle Tyrion pointed out. Remember that principle you pointed out to Cersei? It's one of the more memorable lines of dialogue from George, which is really saying something. Remember, Cersei wanted to tear tongues out of people's mouths who were repeating the incest lie, the incest truth. Tyrion said, the quote is, when you tear out a man's tongue, you're not proving him a liar. You're only telling the world that that you fear what he might say. I've heard that quoted like in lots of other TV shows and stuff. It's such a great line, the way he puts it. So it's not identical. This isn't the exact same thing as what Cersei and Tyrion were talking about, but it's pretty similar. They don't want people talking about that, even if it's true. It is true, but they don't want people talking about it because it saps morale. So an irony here is that, of course, that guy who got thrown over the walls for talking about Melisandre isn't even with Stannis' army. She's at the wall. So like he's way off. So they follow this up by repeating themselves. They're like, they want to push back against this idea of who's cursed. They would declare again, Stannis is the one screwed here. The storm affects him more. They reiterate, he's the one cursed, not us. No, it's him. Yeah, it's like this ping pong game of who's more cursed. Even Lady Dustin stands up and says, we should just wait for the storm to take care of Stannis. Even she gets it. She's not a military person, but she understands. I mean, it's common sense. You don't have to be an expert in military to understand that an army without an ability to march snowed in without food is going to cease to exist at some point soon. So these are the two elements in play. Stannis' army has to manage itself against the storm. Roose' army has to manage itself against itself. Paranoia and fear and mistrust followed by actual deaths turns out to be at least as bad as the storm, if not worse. And of course, the storm is affecting them too, just not as badly as Stannis. And I've said it many times, I'll say it again. Napoleon, one of the greatest military minds of all time, once said that morale is 3 times more important than any other factor in war combined. Maybe he's exaggerating a little, but I'm not going to argue with one of the finest military minds of all time. Like, that guy conquered Europe. Like, he was unbelievably smart about it. Like, that doesn't make him a good person, obviously, but the man was intelligent. So that's why Roose, Ramsay, and everyone is so concerned with morale, because it is just that important. So when Stannis' army does struggle, it isn't with what is our leader doing. It isn't a question of we don't trust our leader. It isn't a question of we're afraid of our leader. It's a question of, oh, well, these men ate a dead body because they're hungry. And then Stannis comes down hard on that, right? He burns them. As hopeless as this situation seems, they still have Stannis' iron will propping them up, and it means a lot. They're like, man, at least we got a strong leader. You know, at least we got that going for him. His intensity, his pride, his confidence, it follows him. His men pick up on that. They're confident no matter how bad it looks because he's confident. Meanwhile, Roose is detached. He's not really that kind of leader. He may seem confident, but it's not really confident. It's more calm. It's more distant. You know, it isn't that kind of confidence. And even Roose's confidence starts to slip a bit throughout these murders that we've only talked about the first one so far. So a lot of smart people inside Winterfell understand what's going on, in that little things can do a lot in terms of morale. And that's why Roose loses this game to Stannis. It's who can wait longer? Can Stannis hold out in the storm, or can Roose hold out while his two armies start to kill each other? So yeah, that's why Stannis ended up winning that waiting game when it looked like he had no hope of that, because of how effective the counter insurgency, for lack of a better term, here inside Winterfell is working. So getting back to the specifics of the chapter, another attempt is made on Theon by the Spearwives. Holly this time approaches him, and this time Theon figures out what they're looking for. He's like, they want me. They want my insight because they want to find a way out. They know that I took the castle. They assume it was using subterfuge because I took it with so few men. That leads them to assume I know secret passages, or at least hidden doors or something like that. And that's what they want from him. And he's probably right. So he figures it out, but he's still missing a huge chunk of the picture. He doesn't know what they're going to do before they leave. He just thinks they want to get out. He's like, yeah, they're just ready to go. And that's that. He has no idea that they're trying to leave with Arya. Second and third blood. Same chapter. I think this is something that a lot of y'all who haven't read this in a while, or maybe even didn't quite process it the first time, is how close together these murders happen. Once they start happening, it's only a few days that all of this plays out. So this is the same chapter, still the ghost in Winterfell, another death, and another death after that. Quote.
The next morning, Ser Aenys Freys' grizzled squire was found naked and dead of exposure in the old castle lichyard, his face so obscured by hoarfrost that he appeared to be wearing a mask. Ser Aenys put it forth that the man had drunk too much and gotten lost in the storm, though no one could explain why he had taken off his clothes to go outside. Another drunkard, Theon thought. Wine could drown a host of suspicions. Then, before the day was done, a crossbowman, sworn to the flints, turned up in the stables with a broken skull. Kicked by a horse, Lord Ramsay declared. A club more like, Theon decided.
only one day later, it says. 2 deaths. One in the morning, one in the late afternoon. And once again, Ramsay gives a cover story, and Theon's like, yeah, I don't think so, which probably means other people are thinking that too. Now, if this had been the only death, that story probably would have worked. One guy dies, broken head. They don't care. Like, yeah, one guy's dead. Big deal. Yeah, kicked by a horse. No one's going to think twice about it if it's the only death. Aenys Frey is known to be cunning. He's a battle-tested commander, no fool, smart man. So he's obviously doing the same thing we've been saying all along. He's lying to maintain morale. He's like, yep, another drunkard. Yep, just a drunken man. Nothing to see here. But again, why did he have his clothes off? That doesn't make any sense. Like, you got to be more than drunk to take your clothes off and walk outside in a snowstorm. That sounds like some very serious drug. Drugs that don't even exist in this setting. Like, that sounds like angel dust or PCP or something like that. I don't think alcohol would lead you to do that. But as the quote says, wine could drown a host of suspicions, because they don't want to think about it. They want it to be true. That's another aspect of this. They want Ramsay's story to be true, even though it's not very believable. They latch onto it because the alternative is there's murderers in the castle, and then I might be next. They don't want to think of that. That's too dark of a thought. A lot of people will be in denial about that. So the cover stories are getting worse. The cover story stinks, and it's only going to work in these sort of men that are engaging in denial. Other men are already doubting. They're already paranoid, and it's getting worse. And some of the ones who are latching onto these denials is like, well, how many denials can they latch onto before it hits a tipping point and they just start to go, there's too many weak stories here. There's got to be more going on. They can't believe it eventually. The kicking by the horse is more believable. That is probably the most believable of all these. It wasn't a naked guy out in the snow, right? Those are the more suspicious ones. But again, it's paired with all these other deaths, so it means a lot more when it isn't a singular one. So the dead of exposure part, let's talk about that for a second. That is where we start to suspect the Spearwives. Because luring him into a sexual encounter, getting his clothes off, that's one of the most straightforward ways to get a man out of his clothes, is a woman flirting or doing more than flirting, seducing, what have you. But it could also be like, someone being drugged and then knocked unconscious, then just remove their clothes, toss them out in the snow, then it looks like something else. Because after all, that one guy's head was caved in from behind. They didn't take his clothes off. So different options here. I think they were just mixing up their tactics a little bit, maybe trying to make it look like different killers, that kind of thing. And it may have been different killers. If it's the Spearwives, well, there's 6 of them, and, one could have done one could have done another. Who knows? So the Boltons and Freys just keep saying, they're going to say whatever they have to say, no matter how pathetic it sounds, rather than admit that there's killers on the loose. And Theon is such a great POV for this, because he's done the exact same thing. He's been through this on the other side. He and Ramsay killed the witnesses to his murder of the Miller's boys, his own Ironborn men. He killed 3 of his own men, the ones that witnessed it, so that nobody would know the truth of Brandon Rickon's escape, except Ramsay. But he killed them off inside Winterfell. He killed his 3 men in Winterfell, which had the side effect of the other Ironborn were like, the castle's rising up against us. There's the people that live here are killing us. We got to do something about that. And Theon's like, yeah, actually it's me and Ramsay. But he's got to agree with him. He can't say that. He's like, yes, let's take extreme measures. Let's be harsher on the Winterfell people here to stop them from doing that. But of course it was him all along. It's the same type of fear. You're living amidst enemies who outnumber you, even if you seem to have the upper hand. Like, they march in with their whole army, the Freys do, and the Boltons, and they're getting killed. Like, they come in with confidence, and then it's like, well, we have no answers here. So that confidence goes away really fast. Theon thinks many times that he has to remember his name. I have to remember my name, including this chapter. But he also remembers those specific 3 men that he had murdered in Winterfell because they knew the truth of Brandon Rickon, rather. But he doesn't know the names of any of these victims, though that will change. It's one of many things, many things that escalates here. And this is in turn why we should seriously consider how coordinated this was. The murderers seem to have a plan. They start with some deaths that can be maybe explained away. But as the murders increase, both in quantity and in the overtness of it being a murder rather than something that can't be explained as an accident, it builds up. It's like they start to lie, but then they get to a spot where a lie is not going to work. And we're going to get to that very soon, as you'll see. So it just, the idea that it's accidents just starts to be unbelievable. So they can't, so Roose and Ramsay are still denying everything. They can't stop others from saying what they want because there's just too many people in the castle. Like even if people are afraid to say what's on their mind, there's just so many people wondering. It's one thing if they're just muttering amongst themselves, but it's way more than that. Theon observes Hostine Frey loudly arguing about it at the Lord's table, meaning Ramsay, Roose, and that means lots of people can hear it. They're just arguing in front of the men. That's also a bad look for morale. Several people disagree. Hostine says, let's go out and attack Stannis. Let's just do it now. And which is eventually what happens, but there's arguing about that because they're like, where is Stannis? You can't just ride out and attack Stannis. We don't know where he is. You just ride out into the snow and just wander around until you find him. That doesn't make any sense. But Wyman Manderly, he's clever as he is. He's like, yeah, let's go. He stirs the pot. He argues for Hostine's plan, which is weird for Hostine because Hostine hates the Manderlys and he knows they hate him. He's like, why are you arguing for my plan? Oh, because you want to ride out behind me and stab us in the back. Correct. So Hostine is mad. He accuses Manderly of murdering his kin. He's like, where are my kin? And Manderly responds by denigrating each man in turn. He calls Rhaegar the round shoulders, Simon always clinking his coins, and Jared always swift to draw his steel. And then he praises Tywin. He's like, your cousins didn't bring me back my son's bones. Tywin did that. I give credit to Tywin for that, which is a hard thing for someone to disagree with because the Lannisters are still in charge, right? So it's like he's praising the current regime, and it's just not appropriate to be like, screw Tywin, the Lannisters suck. No, they're the Boltons and Freys are in power now in part because of the Lannisters. So they can't really, that's not really a thing they can argue about. But it still gets Hostine to challenge Manderly to a fight, which on its face is a little ridiculous, but, and Wyman Manderly feels similarly. This is what happens next. Quote.
Wyman Manderly laughed, but half a dozen of his knights were on their feet at once. It fell to Roger Riswell and Barbary Dustin to calm them with quiet words. Roose Bolton said nothing at all, but Theon Greyjoy saw a look in his pale eyes that he had never seen before, an uneasiness, even a hint of fear.
To me, this is a sign that Roose has reached a tipping point. He starts to realize that maybe I can't outlast Stannis after all. It seemed so easy. We can just sit here, he'll be snowbound, and that'll be it. And he's starting to realize time is not on our side after all. He didn't account for the Winterfell murders. And now he's seeing how badly it's impacting his men. He's like, wow, my army is going to stink. If they don't fight each other, they're going to be so ragged with fear and poor sleep, and yeah, they're not going to be very effective. So he's seeing right in front of his face how his enemies are weakening his position, and there's nothing he can do about it. Time is just, his plan is falling apart. It's unraveling before his eyes. He sees the danger that could undo him if it's left unchecked, and he might not be able to check it because he perceives how precarious his position is. He can't just bend his vassals to his will. He knows he's ruling by fear, and he sees that they aren't as afraid, and that makes him afraid, which is going to make the cycle get even worse for him, because if they see him afraid, they're definitely not going to be afraid of him if he's afraid, right? So that just, it's spiraling for him. Roose knows that his allies aren't that dependable, and he's kind of being exposed in this moment. So everyone in the room, and this is the Great Hall, again, during a meal, a lot of people are there. So they see Roose and his lords arguing with each other. They're making threats to each other. And in general, they're just acting like they're not really in charge. They're acting like they do not have a hold on the situation. This is seeing leadership argue. It's like seeing mom and dad argue. Like, it doesn't seem like things are good right now. Maybe they'll settle it, but it's hard to say things are fine in that moment when the authorities are arguing in front of you, because you know they don't normally do that. They keep their disagreements hidden from the troops. The troops know that. So something's really wrong if they're arguing in front of you. They observe the lack of the authority. Like, Roose can't shut everybody up. He can't shut them down. He can't tell them to stop. His authority is waning, and everyone sees it. And they would also, some people would even take it a step further. They'd realize, I bet Stannis doesn't have this problem. Stannis doesn't have people talking back, arguing in front of him, telling him his plans aren't any good, things like that, or insinuating things like that. He doesn't have Wyman Manderley like openly insulting Stannis' ally. Nothing like that's happening in Stannis' presence. Some of the troops, some of the leaders know that, and they're maybe making that comparison. And they're like, am I on the right side? Houses change sides all the time in these sort of wars. Maybe we should be doing that. You know, we don't like the Boltons in the first place, and we really don't like the Freys. So George is killing it here. He's expertly presenting the different types of fear, the different reasons to fear, the way that fear manifests and plays out, and it's from all the peasant levies all the way up to Roose Bolton. It encompasses everybody in the castle. It's really neat. In situations like these, it's the ones who have the most to lose that often fear the most, right? Roose has the farthest to fall. Everyone fears for their lives here, but Roose stands to lose more power than anybody here. He's risen up, and it's precarious whether or not he can keep it. So, and that's a problem for Roose too, that everyone starts to, well, if I'm afraid for my life, what's scarier than that? Like, how can Roose scare you when you're afraid of dying? Like, well, how could it, I mean, yeah, it could be a little worse. You could flay me to death, but it's not that big a differentiator if you're like, death on this side, death on this side. I'm like, yeah. That's not motivating. If it's only coming from one side, yes, I want to go do this because this guy will kill me. But if it's on both, what do you do if it's on both sides of you? So this is part of why Wyman Manderley is the only one laughing here. He might be the only person in Winterfell who doesn't fear his own death. He might even expect it. There's a lot of theories and ideas out there that I tend to support that Wyman Manderley went to Winterfell knowing it was his last time leaving. He would never go back to White Harbor. He was like, yeah, this is my swan song. This is my magnum opus. I'm going to get my revenge. I'm going to die alongside. I'm going to die with my revenge, executing my revenge, but it's going to be glorious. And it is pretty glorious. It's one of the most outrageous and gross acts of revenge in the history of fantasy literature, right? The pies thing. So he's already won at that point. He's already like, yeah, I've already won several volleys here. I'm already ahead. So let me keep going. So if Wyman really wants to wreck morale, he could reveal it. He could tell everybody, yo, y'all ate human. You're all cannibals now. The old gods hate you. Yes, I'm a cannibal too because I ate them too. But again, I came here to die. I don't care. So, and the Freys, it's even worse for them because they ate their own kin. The gods don't care if it's unwitting. We learned that lesson from the rat cook story. The gods don't differentiate between that. It's the whole ignorance of the law isn't an excuse kind of thing. If you commit incest or not incest, if you commit cannibalism against your own family, doesn't matter if you knew it or not, you're cursed. So whether or not he's responsible for any of those first three murders, Wyman knows he's going to be suspected for it, if not outright blamed for it. And he's all for it. He's like, yeah, go ahead and blame me. Somebody's out there doing good work. I'm going to die anyway. I'll take that heat. I'll take the blame. Let the murderers continue to operate in the shadows. It's me. Yeah, it's me. Fine. Believe that. You know, he's totally willing to do that. Chatty Lumpkin sends a super chat, Canada. Appreciate that. Do you think that this was Mance's plan to create this kind of discord? Mel mentions something about Mance's plan, and I have no idea what that could be. Well, yes and no. I think that it was his plan to create this kind of discord, but I think it went even farther than he thought it would, and it going farther than he thought it would actually kind of backfired a little bit. I'll explain a little more later. So I do have this written down. It's all planned. We'll get to it in good time here. So sit tight, but yes, I have thoughts on that, but we'll get to it in order. For now, let's go on to Fourth blood. We've had first, second, and third. Here's fourth. So the very same night, spilling into the following morning, two more incidents. The murder of a named character and the dial turning up yet again on the internal struggle. Here's another quote.
That night, the new stable collapsed beneath the weight of the snow that had buried it. 26 horses and 2 grooms died, crushed beneath the falling roof or smothered under the snows. It took the best part of the morning to dig out the bodies. Lord Bolton appeared briefly in the outer ward to inspect the scene, then ordered the remaining horses brought inside, along with the mounts still tethered in the outer ward. And no sooner had the men finished digging out the dead men and butchering the horses, than another corpse was found.
This is the only one that I could see being a true accident, but given how many murders there are, it's almost certainly sabotage. A weakening of the structure of the roof would make it vulnerable to the weight that did eventually cause its collapse. And anyone familiar with snow could figure that out, most likely. Anyone cunning that says, yeah, if we get enough weight on that, that's going to collapse, right? So killing horses could be seen as a form of military sabotage, certainly. Roose certainly treats it that way. He becomes very concerned about the rest of the horses and moves them into the Great Hall, which causes a lot of problems. Which implies that this was the intent. Bringing the horses inside makes morale a lot worse, and it was already really bad. And we get a very distinct description of it. We see how badly the conditions in the Great Hall deteriorate after the horses are brought in. Quote,
"The reek within the Great Hall was palpable by eventide, with hundreds of horses, dogs, and men squeezed underneath one roof, the floors slimy with mud and melting snow, horse shit, dog turds, and even human feces, the air redolent with the smells of wet dog, wet wool, and sodden horse blankets. There was no comfort to be found amongst the crowded benches, but there was food. The cooks served up great slabs of fresh horse meat, charred outside and bloody red within, with roast onions and neeps, and for once the common soldiers ate as well as the lords and knights."
It's sort of presented as like, there's a little bit of good, there's a little bit of bad. But if you think about it for a minute, it's like, no, this is mostly bad because that meat's going to run out. And when that meat runs out, you still have all the other awful things, which are probably more awful. The more feces, more horse shit. I like how there's 3 different things. Horse shit, dog turds, human feces. 3 different terms for each one. That sounds horrible, right? It's wet dog, wet wool, sodden horse blankets. The horses are in there too. Yeah. So, and then they try, let's try to boost morale. We got all these things that are hitting morale badly. Let's see if we can reverse this trend a little bit. Have the music. Abel starts singing, but that doesn't work either. The music frightens the horses. So he's got to shut the music down. So even that one small piece of joy or happiness, that one positive thing, even that has to stop. Never mind the irony that they're turning to Mance Rayder and his infiltrators, the ones who are probably causing the majority, if not all of this problem so far. So he's like, hey, help me with morale. You who are the biggest obstacle to good morale in this entire castle. It's also possible that the collapse of that roof is when they were able to do the other murder, because it clearly occupied a lot of people. They were digging out the bodies. They had to pull the horses out. They had to butcher the horses. There's a lot of work there. And of course, that murder may have happened before, but it's not unlikely to have happened during that distraction. Either way, it's the latest escalation. Quote,
"This one could not be waved away as some drunken tumble or the kick of a horse. The dead man was one of Ramsay's favorites, the squat, scrofulous, ill-favored man-at-arms called Yellow Dick. Whether his dick had actually been yellow was hard to determine, as someone had sliced it off and stuffed it into his mouth so forcefully they had broken three of his teeth. When the cooks found him outside the kitchens, buried up to his neck in a snowdrift, both Dick and Man were blue from cold. I'm sorry to laugh.
That one's pretty funny. It's a lot more fun. It's a lot funnier than the different types of poop. So it's almost like the perpetrators kept hearing these weak denials of, like, oh, it was an accident. Oh, he was drunk. And they're like, they're not going to be able to say that this time. Let's do a murder that they can't possibly write off. And that's exactly what the first line is here. This one could not be waved away as some drunken tumble or the kick of a horse. It's wildly brutal, even for Westeros, which is part of why Roose immediately orders the body burned. He says, I'll not have this tale spread. He doesn't want anyone to find out. Narrator, the tale spread. Of course he couldn't. Since he couldn't contain the tale, again, change of tactics. Ramsay, instead of trying to keep it quiet, declares loudly so everyone can hear, when I find the killer, I'll flay him and make him eat his own cooked skin. A vicious, brutal, Dreadfort type threat. And then there's a rumor going around that the killer, if you identify the killer, you get a golden dragon, which is kind of cheap, honestly. Like, your whole army's falling apart and you're only offering one gold piece. That's the price of Rosie in the A Feast for Crows. Like, he had to save up to sleep with a sex worker who's not even a sex worker, she's a young girl. But the point being, like, the same price for that? I think he should have offered more, Roose. Anyway, but maybe he's like, if we offer a reward too high, then people are going to just make things up, you know? So maybe there is some thought behind that. Like, you don't want false accusations. Like, that's the last thing they need, is even more finger pointing, even more like outward people arguing about who's to blame. That's just going to make it worse. But I'm curious here too, where's the fatal wound in Yellow Dick? It wasn't his dick being sliced off isn't what killed him. That was after he was dead. So maybe he died from exposure, but did they wait to cut his dick off after he was dead from exposure? I don't quite understand. So maybe he was knocked out or drugged. Then the penisectomy was performed, and then they left him to die out in the cold. But if he's left to die out in the cold and he's still alive, he might be yelling or crawling around, and there's no evidence of that. So I keep saying they because some of these bodies might have been moved after the death, or maybe they were dragged outside to die from exposure or to make it look like they died from exposure. But we don't have other wounds described. Yellow Dick doesn't have his skull caved in or some stab wound or anything like that. In fact, that's going to come up later. The argument about how they died is going to be meaningful here in a minute. Sir Tony Sled says, thank you, History of Westeros chat and George R. Martin. Thank you, Sir Tony Sled. And yes, as well, thanks to chat and George R. Martin also from us. Let's talk about the Hooded Man. This is a kind of an enduring mystery of A Dance with Dragons. Who the heck is this guy? Let's have a quote to set it up.
Farther on, he came upon a man striding in the opposite direction, a hooded cloak flapping behind him. When they found themselves face to face, their eyes met briefly. The man put a hand on his dagger.
Theon Turncloak. Theon Kinslayer.
I'm not. I never. I was Ironborn.
False is all you were. How is it you still breathe?
The gods are not done with me, Theon answered, wondering if this could be the killer.
Theon then also shows him his hand, which is his brutally mutilated hand, and says, Ramsay's not done with me either. So it's the gods are not done with me and Ramsay's not done with him. The man then laughs. The laughter's a small clue, because there's some characters who never laugh, right? Just some just have no sense of humor at all. It doesn't narrow it down a lot, though, only a little. The man at first signals that he might draw his dagger. He puts his hand on his dagger, and it's not like Theon is threatening him. He's not like, I'm coming for you. So he puts his hand on his dagger because he's like, oh, that guy? I might stab you. But when he sees that Theon's being tortured regularly, he's like, you deserve that even more. I wouldn't want to kill you so that you aren't suffering. I want you to suffer. So this is an interesting moment when this happens too. The setting for this is a little unusual. Theon's walking again. He takes lots of walks to exhaust himself, to be alone, and to help him sleep and all that. And he's walking in a snowdrift, and he's actually has like a brief moment of peace before he sees the hooded man. And I like this moment. The last sentence is really important. Theon answered, wondering if this could be the killer. That sentiment is going to be on the minds of everyone in Winterfell whenever they see something suspicious or a person that they don't recognize. Could that be the killer? Could that be the killer? Could that be the killer? It's constant. Like that. Imagine that. Stinky room, not enough food. It's cold. You're afraid of Stannis. You're afraid of the murderers. Your sleep is going to suffer at that point, and then that's going to spiral even more. So fans have been theorizing about this hooded man for a long time, like basically since the month A Dance with Dragons came out. But there's very little to go on, isn't there? Even less to connect him to any of the murders, even though Theon's thoughts might be taken as a clue, but I don't think so. I don't think he's one of the murderers. But he might be someone important. He might be Hallis Mullen. That's one of my favorite theories, or my favorite theory about who he is. We've referred to Hal Mullen as Captain Obvious during our Valar Revitas series. He became captain of Winterfell's guards after Jory left for the south with Ned, and he held that duty until he also left for the south. So then he is sent back home with Ned's bones, right? That he's leading. Him and 3 men are supposed to go back to Winterfell with the bones. But the Feast for Crow's Appendix lists him as still en route. Then Lady Dustin says she has watchers waiting to catch sight of these bone carriers. She wants to take those bones, Eddard's bones, and feed them to her dogs. However, Hal could have easily had help or warning from the Crannogmen, because the Crannogmen are clearly going to support the Stark side of things here. And so it's not too hard to imagine that Lady Dustin's watchers were given the slip thanks to the Crannogmen. Like they could find a way, they could show him a way to get around. And but he probably left the bones in the neck. He's like, well, Winterfell's been taken. I can't go deliver the bones and bury them in peace if the Boltons have the castle. So he's probably not even carrying them with him. He's probably like, I'm going to go to Winterfell and maybe try to help out, but I'm not going to carry the bones with me. That's not helpful. So he could infiltrate one of the armies, maybe sneak in the castle some way, especially one of the friendly armies, like the Manderlys or the Hornwoods. He shows up. He's like, hey, I'm Winterfell's captain of guards. Just help me out here. And they're like, yeah, all right, get in here. There's a lot of houses that would be willing to help. There's a lot of northern houses that would be like, yes, we'd gladly help you against the Boltons. Just keep it quiet, though, you know. There's another theory that it's Harwin. Harwin, the one who joins the Brotherhood Without Banners, the one who was the son of the Master of Horse at Winterfell. And it works because, in part, he's familiar with Winterfell, like Hal Mullen would be. Why would he have left the South? Why does he not be with the Brotherhood Without Banners anymore? Well, because Stoneheart is looking for Arya, and everyone would have heard that Arya's getting married in the North. So Stoneheart, you can imagine her being like, that could be fake. She's not just going to assume this is the real Arya. She knows how this game is played. She knows the Boltons. She knows that a fake Arya is entirely possible. It's at least going to occur to her. So what are you going to do? You got to check. You got to send someone who knows what Arya looks like and verify one way or the other if it's really her. Because if it is her, well, then Catelyn Stoneheart's like, well, my daughter's alive. That's where we're going. They'll all go there to try to rescue her. If not, then she knows that's not really her. And I don't know what she would do with that information, but she has to send someone that knows what Arya looks like. And the only person that works for the part of the BWB that qualifies, I think, is Harwin. And of course, he also has experience in the North, familiar with Winterfell. So he does check off all the boxes. However, the counter argument here is their eyes meet briefly, it says in the quote there. So I kind of doubt it's someone Theon knows. He would recognize Hal Mullen. He would recognize Harwin. Some argue the hood maybe obscures his face. I don't know. Can your eyes meet if the hood is covering your face? I don't know about that. Maybe it's just for a second, and it's just like he sees the eyes for a second, the snowstorm, it's dark. Maybe he doesn't get a good look. I don't know. It's possible, but I tend to downplay the idea that it's someone he knows for that reason, even though I do like the Hal Mullen theory. Another less likely theory, in my opinion, is that Theon is disassociating. That he's talking to someone that isn't there. It's called the Theon Durden theory, as in Fight Club, Tyler Durden, Theon Durden, Tyler Durden. That's pretty cool that it's so similar. So the idea is that Theon is one of the killers, but he doesn't know. He doesn't even realize it because it's like his alter ego. It's a clever theory, but there isn't really much to support it. I mean, you could argue that him hearing those voices and the weird semi-disassociating moments he has in front of the tree, but I don't know if that's sufficient. I don't even know if that's disassociating. It might be kind of a stretch. And then later he's questioned, right? Roose and some of the other lords bring him up and they're like, "Are you the murderer?" And he's like, he stammers. He's like, And Lady Dustin says, "Take off your glove." And he's embarrassed to do it, which is interesting given he did it without hesitation to the hooded man. That's kind of peculiar, isn't it? He shows the hooded man. He's like, "Yeah, here's my hand." But when Lady Dustin says he's embarrassed to do it in front of all the lords, even though they all know, right? Even though it would help prove his innocence, because that's what she's kind of doing indirectly. So he does pull the glove off eventually. They order him to do it. And she's like, "Look, how could he do it? Look at his hand." And Roger Riswell, that's the guy whose groom was the first murder victim. So he's very invested in this. He agrees with Lady Dustin. He's like, "It can't be that guy. It can't be Theon. He's incapable. Look at him. He's just weak." He says all the dead were strong men and none of them were stabbed. Because one of the Freys says, "Well, he could still stab someone with a few fingers. He's got enough to hold a knife, right?" But Riswell's like, "Yeah, no." And they weren't stabbed anyway. So that doesn't help. Which, by the way, is why I was so sure that some of those other characters didn't have any obvious wounds on them. It's like, well, how exactly did they die? Was it just exposure? So Roose Bolton agrees as well. He says, "Yeah, I agree. Plus, he doesn't have it in him to betray my son." That's not true, clearly, because he's going to betray his son by stealing Jane away. But it's not. But still, Roose is right that he's not connected to the murders. He's at least right about that. But then Roger Riswell repeats one of the paranoid claims from before. He says, "Stannis has agents in the castle. That's who's doing the murders." And no one can really fully argue against that because it is reasonable. But Aenys Frey sort of pivots and says, "No, it's the Manderlys. It's clearly the Manderlys. They hate us. They already killed some of my family. We just can't prove it." And Lady Dustin retorts, "He doesn't hate us. He hates you." And lots of other Northmen do too. And Roose tells them to stop. Roose is like, "Stop arguing." It's again tensions between leadership flaring. They're arguing, they're at each other's throats, and Roose has a hard time stopping them. Aenys is being self-centered. He's like, "They're coming for us. Mando's coming for us." Only one of the murders was a Frey at this point, and he wasn't even an actual Frey. He was a Frey employee, a squire, right? So this, not even of their family, just some dude, right? So, yeah. I think that just shows his paranoia as well as his, taking it personally. Like, everyone's out to get us. Well, what about these other 3 bodies then? That's not you. Those aren't your men. So the other irony here is that Roose Riswell wants to blame Stannis. Aenys wants to blame Manderly. They might not be that different. We know that they aren't directly working together because Manderly's working with Davos, but Stannis doesn't even know Davos is still alive. And Davos tells Manderly, "I'm happy to call, we're happy to work with you." And Manderly says, "Yeah, if you restore Rickon to Winterfell, the Starks to Winterfell, I'll call Stannis king." So even though they haven't communicated a lot with each other, they are working towards the same goals. So the trick is, don't confuse people working to help Stannis with people who Stannis has actually sent to do something. I don't think he has done that at all. He does have, people getting him information, but they're not doing this. They're not murdering people, I don't think. So many of the Northerners they like the idea of what Stannis is doing. Beat the Boltons, beat the Freys, restore the Starks. They don't have to like Stannis to agree with, that's the exact plan we want to do. Maybe they'll get rid of Stannis after that, but they definitely like what he's doing in the short term. But that doesn't mean they're going to tell him their plan. That doesn't mean they're going to tell Stannis everything they know. Like, if they're kind of using him because their goals align, that doesn't necessarily mean they trust him with everything. So, again, back to the Hooded Man briefly. I don't think the Hooded Man is one of the murderers, so I don't want to go too much farther with this. But he's important because he makes the list and because he reminds us of the paranoia in the castle. Theon's like, is this the murderer? And that alone makes him important. So Theon is released when they agree that it's not him. He's not doing the killing, so let him go. So he goes and does another walk. He's again trying to wear himself down so he can get some sleep. And then, as if there wasn't enough ruining morale in the castle, there's the horn and the drums. The drums are interesting because it's keeping people up. It's messing with their sleep, which is a great way to hurt morale even more. They were already having trouble with sleep because of the stench and it's not comfortable, too many people. But let's remember how big drums were in setting up the mood for the Red Wedding, which that's a neat little callback because the Red Wedding perpetrators are right here in the castle. All the guilty parties are right there. Well, not all of them, but they're represented there. And George even uses the same sound words to indicate boom, doom, boom, doom. Exactly the word choices for the drums at the Red Wedding. So Theon hears the drums and the horn, and he understands that everyone's hearing. He's like, that's loud enough that everyone's hearing it, even the horses. And then, quote,
and a name passed from the lips of each man to the next, written in small white puffs of breath. Stannis, they whispered. Stannis is here. Stannis is come. Stannis, Stannis, Stannis.
Kind of sounded like someone was having sex with Stannis there.
Oh, it was Melisandre.
Stannis, yeah, it's Melisandre.
Saying that.
It's not Selyse. She wouldn't say that. You know? He also wouldn't sleep with her anymore. So Theon is bitterly neutral about the whole thing. He's like, I'm doomed either way. Like, if Ramsay doesn't kill me, Stannis will hand me to Jon Snow, who would also kill me. So he's not neutral because he has no stake in the result. It's that the result is the same either way. He might slightly prefer Jon Snow killing him because that would probably be less torturous, but he doesn't really make that distinction in the moment. But he thinks through the scenario and realizes that Roose Bolton might actually want to fight after all. At first, Roose said, we wait, Stannis suffers, that's all we got to do. But Theon's starting to realize, as we've been saying, that truth has shifted. Roose can't rely on that anymore. And he's like, yeah, actually, Theon thinks Roose would welcome a fight right now because his men are itching for a fight. He needs to give them something to do. And waiting is no longer working. But again, he doesn't know where to send them. He can't send them after Stannis because he doesn't know where they are. He doesn't know where Stannis is. And so that's a lot of tension, right? And it keeps escalating. So again, Theon goes back to the Godswood. And this is another time where the tree seems to be speaking to him, saying his name and then Bran. He hears Theon and Bran. He's like hearing these voices. And he continues to pray out loud. He's sad. He's almost overcome. Well, he is overcome. He's just having a moment there, but he doesn't realize he's been followed. 3 of the Spearwives follow him, and they ask who he's talking to. And he's like, the gods, and they grab him, and he immediately suspects them of the murder. He's like, you're the murderers, aren't you? And he's like, you should kill me too. Just kill me too. Put me out of my misery. And Holly laughs at him. She says, how could it be us? We're women. And then she goes on to, elaborate how it couldn't possibly be us because, no one would suspect it. We're just soft and we're here to be slept with, not, we're not killers. How could we possibly? She's sarcastic, of course. She's playing with him because a moment later she says, yeah, we are going to kill you, but quickly and painlessly. But not until we take you to Abel. And this is where the Ghost of Winterfell chapter at last ends. Even for in A Song of Ice and Fire chapter, that one had a lot. It's not even that long of a chapter. It's like a little shorter than average even for in A Dance with Dragons chapter. Kind of wild, huh? We try to be as consistent as we can with History of Westeros podcast. We put out a lot of episodes per year. We're grinding away with all the different topics we can come up with. We never seem to run out of topics, and I don't think we ever will. But it still does take a little bit of thinking here and there to come up with these ideas. And we hope you appreciate our process. We hope you appreciate our content. And if you do and you want to give back, Patreon's the best way to do that. Sharing us with your friends is also a great way to do that. Word of mouth is the most powerful tool in the arsenal of any podcaster. You telling your friends that you like our show is more powerful than anything we could say or advertise or put elsewhere, because other people, when they hear us for the first time, they don't know to trust us. They have no idea who we are. But if you're talking to your friends, well, safe assumption that there's some level of trust, if not a lot of trust, between y'all. So that's us. If you want to be a supporter of History of Westeros, go to patreon.com/History of Westeros and find the support level that's right for you. We got a lot of bonus content. We've got the voting that I talked about. We've got access to our scripts, shout outs, things like that. We try to give back some good, cool little freebies for those of y'all who are supporting us. And that's it. Patreon.com/History of Westeros. Hope you can join us up and get further onto the inside of History of Westeros content. Here's a shout out, or rather super chat from Jay Tanner. It says, longtime listener to the podcast. First time I've caught a live stream. Thank you for all your hard work. Appreciate that. That's awesome. I'm glad you're able to catch a live stream. It's fun to interact with your fellow Westorians, fellow fans of A Song of Ice and Fire. Our comments, the people who are chatting are always doing good work there. We get a lot of great comments, a lot of good questions. Very insightful group. Very well read. The average History of Westeros listener is probably several rereads deep, or at least deep in the podcast and all that. So yeah, I really love our fandom, our community.
I would say that's probably your only disappointment with our live streaming setup, is that you don't get to see the live stream comments yourself. You've mentioned that before because you like the live chatter so much. I try to make sure I tell you after things that I didn't bring up, but yeah,
that's a good point. Yeah, I can't watch the comments while I'm reading the episode document and trying to podcast. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah,
that's
I have
my
mentioned that.
job.
That's her job. Yeah, we're a team. Heather Hare also says, that passage has echoes of Arya in Harrenhal. Both Theon and Arya think about being ghosts. Yeah, good catch. She thinks of a ghost in Harrenhal. He thinks he's a ghost in Winterfell. And in both cases, there's murders happening. Of course, Arya's telling Jaqen to do that. It's just he knows exactly what's happening. But it's still a similar vibe for the inhabitants of the castle. They don't know who's doing it. They blame the curse. They blame the curse of Harren the Black. Some people do. Here, they're blaming a curse, too. The old gods or whatever. Paranoia running wild. Liette Rubenfeld says, I thought the sobbing was Bran. Yeah, I kind of wonder about that, too. I wonder what Bran is sobbing about. Like, we don't see him sobbing in the cave scenes, but it doesn't mean he couldn't be. I mean, if he's looking at Winterfell and he sees what's happening there, that might make him cry. He might be sad about it. Of course, he already knows. He was there when Winterfell got sacked, hiding in the crypts. He would know that if he's looking through the tree, he would know that's not really Arya because they got married in front of the tree, so he would see that. It's definitely a mystery, but it's a different mystery from the one we have today. It's not related to the murders, so since I don't have a simple answer, all I have is a similar level of confusion. I do think Bran is the best possible guess. I don't really know who else it could be. Like, it's kind of a process of elimination there. Like, and there's no one else to eliminate. It's like Bran or I don't know. So yeah, I think Bran is what I would have to land on too for that. But not it's sort of like a conclusion rooted partly in, well, who else could be talking through the werewood, and there's no other candidates. It's not necessarily that a lot points to Bran, but it's that nothing points to anyone else. So let's briefly recap where we're at here. 4 murders plus 2 deaths from the stable roof collapse. You could call that 20. You could call that 6 deaths, 6 murders. 26 horses on top of that. And this forces the men to share space with the animals. Space shrinks as fear increases. Morale drops even further. Mistrust increases. People weren't getting good sleep, so they're irritable. Now there's horns and drums, making that problem way worse, while increasing the fear of Stannis, because it sounds like he's right nearby. He's here, right? He's not, but that's what they think. And then there's open hostility between Frey and Manderlys. There's lords arguing with each other in front of the men, which is really out of line and really unusual. And there's no solid leads on a suspect or suspects among, at least as far as the authority figures have stated. Plenty of suspicions for both readers and characters, but nothing that anyone can pin down. So at this point in the story, Mance and his washerwomen look like the strongest culprits. Frankly, I think it's nearly a sure thing, but let's move on and sort that out. The next relevant chapter hits a fork in the road, a green fork of sorts. Haha. Jane, it rhymes with airplane. That was one of our joke titles during Valar Reread for A Dance with Dragons. The actual title is Theon 1, which is relevant because it's Theon 1. It's not Reek. It's not the Prince of Winterfell or the Ghost in Winterfell or the Turncloak. It's Theon. It's like when he breaks free from Ramsay, he becomes himself again. And this is the chapter he does that. But before he escapes, he escapes at the end of the chapter. Before that, there's a lot more death. So this chapter actually comes only 4 chapters after the last one. It's like George wanted to keep this in mind for the reader without going too many other places in the story. 2 of them actually help maintain the feel of this chapter, while 2 of them are like palate cleansers. They both take place in Slaver's Bay, the 2 palate cleansers. It's a Tyrion one and a Dany one. Or maybe a Barristan one. Anyway, the Jaime chapter is one of the 2 that is somewhat has the same vibe because it's at Raventree Hall. So you already get to talk of the ravens and the dead werewood tree there and all that. And the Jon chapter, which is the other one of the 4 chapters in between these 2 Theon chapters, is the wedding of Sigorn and Alice Karstark. So it's another wedding of a Northerner, and of course, Alice Karstark has a little bit of a tie-in to Arya because of Melisandre's vision, thinking that she's seeing Arya when, in fact, she was seeing Alice. And Cregan Karstark was trying to chase her, and, of course, he does not succeed. Tries to steal Alice's rights, kind of like how Bolton is stealing fake Arya's rights in name, as Arya, or as instead of Jane Poole. So, little parallels there. George loves to do that. And it's, of course, the last Theon chapter and the last action in Winterfell for this book. It's the end of the Winterfell arc for A Dance with Dragons. Though we do see Theon again in the following, in an Asha chapter that comes later in this book, because he turns up with, the Braavosi banker. And Asha's like, what? The Braavosi banker and Theon? What the hell? Very strange. And that's, of course, Asha's final chapter when Theon arrives in Stannis' camp. So I wanted to mention these other chapters briefly for those reasons, but also because even in the Daenerys chapter on the other side of the world, which I described as a palate cleanser, George R. Martin finds ways to connect them anyway. The last sentence of the Dany chapter, which is also a wedding, by the way, to Hisdar. So like bunch of weddings here. The last line of that Dany chapter is, "The morning came too soon." The next chapter is Theon 1, which is, "The day stole upon them just as Stannis had, unseen." So the morning comes, the day stole upon them. Yeah, it really kind of flows nicely there. Good job, George. Of course, Stannis is not actually upon them. He thinks that Stannis has reached them, but he's not. He's still snowbound, where he was all this time. But that's the buildup of this fear. That's the fear-based conclusion that they reach upon hearing those horns. But the horns aren't an army. It's a group of green boys with shovels and one old man. It's like it's a mummer's farce, as to use a term appropriate for the setting. But it works so well. They're so afraid. They're like, okay, Stannis is nearby. Roose is like, all right, well, we got to do something. This time, the arguing gets even worse because Theon goes into the Great Hall in the morning, and who's arguing? Ramsay and Roose. It's the Boltons arguing. That's worse than the allies arguing. This is the 2 allegedly most powerful people in the castle, and they're arguing. And Theon notices fear on Fat Walda's face. Ramsay's in a foul mood because of the drums, and this is where things come to a head. Roose's growing concerns hit that tipping point. He decides, yep, I can't keep the men together anymore. I gotta send a detachment out, a large detachment, half of them probably, because they're gonna kill each other. And this miscalculation, though, is not just a problem for Roose's side. It actually screws Mance's plan a bit. And this is back to the question we got earlier from, I think, Chatty Lumpkin. Mance wanted to sow discord and distractions to the point that they could reach a point where things were bad enough in the castle that they could escape with Arya. But this made it worse. This forced their hand into rescuing Arya at a moment that maybe wasn't ideal. They had to do, it was a now or never situation because the armies were on the move. They realized that if we don't get out of here with Arya now, we won't be able to get to Stannis before these armies do. If they get to Stannis first, we're screwed. They might catch us from behind, or Stannis might not even be there for us to get rescued by. So this is not what Mance and the Spearwives planned for. They did not plan to have to do this rescue on the fly rather than choosing their moment. They had to do it because they ran out of time, not because they're like, this is the right moment to pull off the plan that we've been working towards all this time. Their hand was forced. And as we all know, even if you've forgotten some of the details, what happens here, I'm sure you remember that this escape goes very badly. Theon tells Abel, this escape plan will never work. They'll get hunted down. And Abel says, no, all we gotta do is get to Stannis. All we gotta do is get close to him. They were fooled by the horns too. They think Stannis is right outside the walls with the drums and everything. Oops. They think they don't have to go far at all. They think all we gotta do is get outside 100 feet, 200 feet, half a mile, something like that. We don't have to get far at all to get into Stannis' camp. Wrong. The horns and drums screwed them up. So Theon starts to panic a little bit. He starts to think about what Ramsay will do to them when they're caught. Not if they're caught, when they're caught. And he's like, oh, God, you're doing this to rescue Eddard Stark's daughter, and it's not even Eddard Stark's daughter. And he refrains from telling them that because he's not sure they'll still rescue her if they find out who she really is. They might still, because if everyone believes she's Arya, then it still matters. The lie is still present. If they believe the lie, they still have to go along with that. It's a notable point. Theon doesn't want to go through with it, but he also doesn't want Jane to remain in Ramsay's clutches. And somewhat surprisingly, perhaps, maybe not surprisingly, his desire to save her wins out over his fear for himself, which is it's pretty meaningful for Theon there. All he had to do was admit, hey, that's not Arya. And they might scrap the plan and that's it. He can just go, yeah, then I don't have to do this. I don't have to go through with this crazy escape plan that I don't think is going to work. But he doesn't do that. He keeps quiet. He's like, no, Jane deserves to be rescued. Just because she's not Arya doesn't mean she doesn't deserve to get out of Ramsay's clutches. No one knows better than him what she's going through, right? A lot of people know she's going through something awful because of the crying at night, the screaming, but Theon knows firsthand what Ramsay does to people. But as Theon is thinking through, he's interrupted. The doors crash open, letting the cold wind blow in and driving everyone's attention to the distraction, quote.
Through it strode Ser Hosteen Frey, caked with snow to the waist, a body in his arms. All along the benches, men put down their cups and spoons to turn and gape at the grisly spectacle. The hall grew quiet. Another murder. Snow slid from Ser Hosteen's cloaks as he stalked toward the high table, his steps ringing against the floor. A dozen Frey knights and men-at-arms entered behind him. One was a boy Theon knew, Big Walder, the little one, fox-faced and skinny as a stick. His chest and arms and cloak were spattered with blood. The scent of it set the horses to screaming. Dogs slid out from under the tables, sniffing. Men rose from the benches. The body in Ser Hosteen's arms sparkled in the torchlight, armored in pink frost. The cold outside had frozen his blood. "My brother Merritt's son!" Hosteen Frey lowered the body to the floor before the dais, butchered like a hog and shoved beneath a snowbank. A boy! Little Walder, thought Theon, the big one.
Theon immediately suspects Manson Company because he's pretty sure the Spearwives did all the other murders, so he pins this one on them too. But Rowan sees the look he's giving her. He doesn't say it out loud. He sees the look. She's just looking at her, or he's just looking at her like, you did this, right? And she says, this was no work of ours. She immediately knows what he's saying and shuts it down. And Abel says, be quiet. Don't talk about this in front of people. Like, y'all shut it down. So I wonder what's going through his head in this moment. He's like, we didn't do that one. What the hell's going on here? So on one hand, his plotting is working. He's getting people to fight. He's getting the castle's inhabitants to wonder and worry and to suspect each other. But you'll notice they didn't kill anyone important. They didn't kill anyone like this. They didn't kill a Frey or a Bolton. They killed lower level guys. One of Ramsay's men was as far as they went. So this is what I said earlier about maybe it worked too well, and then this added on top a murder that Manson Company didn't plan for. And that's what causes things to spiral a bit and forces them to change the timetable on their plan, which in turn causes it all to go awry. Let's hear the rest following that first part of the quote. Here's the rest.
Lord Ramsay descended from the dais to the dead boy. His father rose more slowly, pale-eyed, still-faced, solemn.
This was foul work.
For once, Roose Bolton's voice was loud enough to carry.
Where was the body found?
Under that ruined keep, my lord, replied Big Walder. The one with the old gargoyles. The boy's gloves were caked with his cousin's blood. I told him not to go out alone, but he said he had to find a man who owed him silver.
What man?
Ramsay demanded.
Give me his name. Point him out to me, boy, and I will make you a cloak of his skin.
He never said, my lord, only that he won the coin at dice. The Frey boy hesitated. It was some White Harbor men who taught dice. I couldn't say which ones, but it was them.
Some White Harbor man. This one's fairly straightforward, to be honest, if you catch the clues. It's not some White Harbor man. It's a pretty clever frame job, though, Big Walder. He notices that the Freys and Manderlys hate each other, so if he kills his own cousin, he will not be suspected. Well, not by the characters, but by us? Yeah, absolutely. The reason I don't really entertain other notions is not because the Spearwives deny it, although that helps. Big Walder is literally caught red-handed. His gloves are caked with his cousin's blood. It's on his cloak. It's on his chest. And it's frozen when he comes into the room. So that means the blood was fresh when he found him. How do you get the blood splattered all over you when you found his body? It doesn't make sense. What, does he throw himself on his cousin in grief? Not this kid. No way. This kid is ruthless and cold. And yeah, he's the one who talked about becoming the Lord of the Crossing one day, even though there's 40-some cousins ahead of him and brothers and whatever, uncles, grandfathers, whatever. So it's just completely unbelievable. And George, I love the tip that his hands are literally red-handed. So good. But yeah, so even if that were believable, like before the red hands, he demonstrated red flags, I guess is one way you could look at it. All the things he had said prior to this, like when Lewin's like, your kin is dead. Where's your grief? And he's like, oh yes, we're very sad. and Bran's like, they're not, though. Even Bran, a 7-year-old, realizes that they're lying and that they're not sad, that they're pretty cold. So, again, there's just no way this blood would be on him if he discovered the corpse. It's only going to be on him if he was the stabber. And yeah, so I don't... Sir Hosteen doesn't have blood on. The guy who carried the body in does not have blood on him because it was frozen. So there's little question that this was the case of Big killing Little, though Little was bigger than Big. What? Yeah. The big question is who? No. Walder's killing Walders, right? Yeah. First they're eating themselves, now they're killing each other, yeah. So this predictably leads to Hosteen blaming Manderly, who he's pinned it all on up to this point. And Manderly's like, sure, pin it on me. Go right ahead. I don't care. I'm all for it, you know? They've been suspicious the whole time, right? And it blinds them to this to me, very obvious physical evidence. If they sat and thought about it for a minute, they'd be like, yeah, this doesn't make sense. Why do you have blood all over you, Walder? It doesn't make sense. So this is where we get this very famous and entertaining exchange between Sir Hostine and Lord Wyman. We know the man who did this, killed this boy and all the rest. Not by his own hand, no. He is too fat and craven to do his own killing, but by his word.
He turned to Wyman Manderlys.
Do you deny it?
The Lord of White Harbor bit a sausage in half. I confess. He wiped the grease from his lips with his sleeve. I confess that I know little of this poor boy. Lord Ramsay's squire, was he not? How old was the lad?
9 on his last name day.
So young, said Wyman Manderley. Though, mayhaps, this was a blessing. Had he lived, he would have grown up to be a Frey.
Zing.
Iconic line.
Iconic. So, you see what I'm saying here? He's absolutely knows that he didn't do it. He doesn't know who did, because he doesn't know little Walder killed his own brother. Or maybe he caught the physical evidence and was chuckling to himself like, these idiots. It's really obvious who did this, but I'm not going to tell them. He's happy to take it. I was like, yeah, be mad at me. Yeah, blame me. Then you won't find the real again, just like the other murders. He's like, yep, go ahead and blame me. So Hostine not only blames Manderley for little Walder, he just goes ahead and blames him for all the other killings. And I'm sure Abel and company are like, good. Yeah, blame him for that. Especially because they may not have expected Wyman to be so gladly take it all on himself. But maybe Wyman and Mance have had a conversation. It's possible. He could be the go-between Stannis and, there's a possibility that there was a conversation here, that they were working in concert. Maybe. Also, Abel and company were glad to hear what came next, which is Hostine attacking. He just busts his sword out, and I don't think Manderley saw that coming because it cuts through his throat. He's severely injured. We're not even sure he's going to survive. And there's some people killed. Like a couple of White Harbor men die, and so do a couple of Freys, and another one of Ramsay's men die. And that's it for Roose. He's like, all right, this proves the thing I'm worried about. Frey and Manderley are now fighting against you. It's no longer just words and arguing and yelling and threats. They actually are killing each other. We can't keep everyone jammed in Winterfell like this anymore. I can't. I got to send them out. I don't want to do it, but I got to. Now, but something has changed for Roose, which I'll mention in a moment. Now, from a motive standpoint, getting the elements of Roose's coalition to fight each other sounds like a big win for those supporting Stannis and for those who want to restore the Starks and those who want to defeat the Boltons or all of the above. But it may not be what Abel and company had in mind exactly. Everyone obeys Roose's commands to stop fighting each other and turn their wrath on Stannis. That's what he says. He says, no more fighting each other. Go fight Stannis if you want someone to kill. And Hostine's like, all right, let's do it. But I'm not done with him. When we're done with Stannis, I want my reckoning with Manderley, which maybe implies Manderley will live, but how does he know? Anyway, more argument happens. And ironically, what happens again, Roose is like, hey, Abel, sing for us. Again, he's like, hey, dude who's causing all the problems, help us out here. But it also keeps Abel occupied. He can't, participate in the rescue plan if he even was. I don't think he was going to because he can't be the one sneaking into the room. He can't get past the guards. But still, he's not able to do anything. He's got to sit there and sing while the Spearwives go off and do the rescue plan. And that's when it happens. Right when he starts singing, they decide this is it. We got to go now. And Theon's like, in the daytime? Are you crazy? But Rowan's like, we can't wait. The Freys are leaving now. The Manderlys leaving now. We have to beat them. We have to get to Stannis first. And he says, what about Abel? He can't leave. He's stuck here. And they're like, he can fend for himself. Abel can fend for himself. We're not going to blow the whole plan for that reason. And as they're leaving, Theon says, winter is coming. And Rowan gets mad at this. She gets irritated. She's like, you have no right to use Lord Eddard's words after what you did. And he retorts, well, you killed a boy too, little Walder. He blames it on her. And she repeats her denial. Says, it wasn't us. And he says, well, you killed those others too. Why not him? But she gets mad and repeats herself. But he keeps going. He's not stopping. He says, words are wind.
They are no better than me. We're just the same.
You killed the others. Why not him? Yellow Dick.
Stank as bad as you. A pig of a man.
And little Walder was a piglet. Killing him brought the Freys and Manderlys to dagger points. That was cunning. And then she cuts him off again. Because she's like, no, it wasn't us. And that's an important clue here. She describes what Yellow Dick smells like. Meaning or implying that she got up and close with him. That's the big clue. So it sounds like Rowan and maybe the others had a compunction against killing a child, even a Frey child, because she's mad about the accusation. Even she's not mad about the other accusations. Like, she doesn't say, we did that. But when he mentions Yellow Dick, she's like, yeah, he stank. She's not mad about being accused of killing the others. Only the accusation of little Walder gets her mad. So that's interesting. So it's one of the most telling moments of all because it definitely draws a distinction, even if we didn't already know based on the physical evidence, that this is a separate murderer, a separate murder, separate motivation, all that. And that's why it may have screwed them up a little bit because they didn't see it coming. They didn't plan for it. They didn't know that it would cause the armies to get moving, which meant, again, they had to get moving. And it didn't work. Let's look at the culprits. Everyone who's being considered, even though we think we know who did it. To summarize, Mance and the Spearwives did all the killings except for Walder. That's my belief, and I think it's spelled out pretty well here in the text, although it isn't necessarily explicit if you're not looking for all the clues or gathering. So pretty comfortable with that read of things. And but all the people getting blamed for it, it's not them. Only Theon blames them. Everyone else is blaming agents of Stannis. Arguably Mance and the Washerwoman are agents of Stannis, but he doesn't know they were sent. Or does he? I don't think he knows. That's an important question. They were sent by Melisandre and with Jon's assent. It's not made clear that Stannis was informed. It's not even made clear that Stannis knows Mance is still alive, that the switch was done. I don't think he does. That's another topic, but yeah, either way, this is pro-Stannis whether he knows about it or not. Another example of that. And the Manderlys, again, even better example possibly. We know Wyman is working with Robert Glover and Davos, etc. Stannis doesn't know he's helping them, or they're helping him, but they definitely are. But who else is with them? The Manderlys probably aren't alone. They've probably reached out to other houses that would clearly be unhappy with Bolton rule and or have a grudge, if not, vengeance in mind against the Boltons for what they did to both the Starks and some of their own men probably at the Red Wedding. Like so many different houses in the North lost kin at the Red Wedding. Lady Dustin points that out in one of the arguments she has with the Freys in front of Roose. Again, and the Hooded Man, right? The Hooded Man is only a culprit, only a suspect from readers, and maybe Theon briefly. Although Theon probably gave that idea up once he realized it was the Spearwives. He's probably like, he doesn't think about the Hooded Man again, but if he did, he'd probably be like, okay, well, it probably wasn't him. It was, now I know who it was. Although he still doesn't know who killed Walder. And that is another question. If the Hooded Man is not a murderer, and I don't think he is, what is his narrative purpose? What's his deal? What's the point of that scene? I'm not saying there isn't one. I'm not saying George didn't. There is no point to that. I'm saying I don't know what it is. I think there is a point. I just don't know what it is. And at first, I just wrapped that character up into the whole pastiche of murder and wondering. But piecing it together like this, I'm like, yeah, what is the deal with that character if he's not a murderer? And I'm really sure he's not. So what's kind of ironic about the bad guys in this scenario, the Freys and the Boltons, they're the ones that you can be very sure are the least likely to be killing people because it's hurting them so bad. It's screwing up the armies, or the morale of their armies. Of course, little Walder is most certainly a culprit, the actual murderer of his cousin. But he doesn't understand the bigger picture like that. He doesn't realize that he's 9 or 10 or whatever. He doesn't understand, which is really young for killing someone. But he isn't some big strategic thinker, right? He doesn't realize necessarily that this is going to be the thing that causes his family to go openly against the Manderlys, who they are blaming for this. But that was part of his thinking. He knew to blame the man. He was smart enough to blame the Manderlys. Some White Harbor men. And it's funny, he didn't actually say Manderlys. It's even cleverer. He just says White Harbor men, which everyone knows is going to be Manderlys. Of course, you're going to connect that dot, even if it's not true. That's just kind of an obvious leap. So, which someone like Sir Hosteen, who, remember, Stannis nicknames him Sir Stupid, he's not going to think through that, especially not when he's enraged, right? He's not thinking straight, even when he's thinking straight. Certainly not when he's maddened. But there's a little caveat too here. Let's think about the contents of the pink letter. You don't have to believe that Ramsay wrote the pink letter to think that this might have happened anyway. And what I mean by that is, in the letter, he says he caught the 6 spearwives and Mance, killed the spearwives, flayed them, and made Mance a cloak of their skins. That might not be true. The problem is, it's precise. He named the number of spearwives, which is bad because it implies, because if he didn't name the number, we could at least hold on to hope that 1 or 2 of them got away. But it doesn't sound like that. If the letters are complete forgery, well, then we have to wonder how the forger got some of this information. If the forger himself is Mance, that would explain it. If the letter was written by somebody else, then whatever. There's other possibilities, but this is not a pink letter episode. But you see the point, I think, that they may have learned after the fact. After Theon escapes with Jane, things get worse. They capture Mance and the spearwives and torture them and get information out of them. Then they learn, oh, they're the murderers. But maybe they didn't even question them about that. But they probably did. So there's a lot that happened off page. I'm glad it was off page. I don't want to see a torture scene up on page, right? But the downside to that is, what information did they extract via torture there? You know? Yeah. Our quote of the week. I've really enjoyed doing these quotes of the week. Whenever I read, I try to make note of the most interesting or passages or the best prose or things that are nods to George R. Martin. That's not one of these, but this is just a great line, a great series of paragraphs. It's pretty early in this book, which is Between Two Fires by Christopher Buehlman. So it came that the first among the fallen, whose name was Lucifer, said, "Our old enemy sleeps. If we do not seize this hour, we will come to the end of days as he has written them, and he will grind us under his heel and destroy us forever. Let us rise against him now in all our numbers and pull the walls of heaven down and shake out the souls of the just. And let us seize our brother angels by the throat and cast them down into hell, and let us live as once we did upon the great height." But some were fearful of the power of the angels of God, whose numbers were greater, and whose generals were Uriel and Gabriel, and Michael, who had broken the back of Lucifer and sent him into the hot coals in the belly of the earth to blacken his face with soot and know he was lower than the Lord. And some were fearful that God would wake from his drowsiness and rack them with pains and fires even they had not learned to endure, or destroy them utterly. And the first among the fallen spoke to them, saying, "Then let us test him one more time. It is for man's sake that we were insulted, for his sake that we were driven out, and for his peace that we are mortared under. Let us break the roof of hell with our fists and murder the seed of Adam. For if God will not rouse himself to save his favorite creature, his sleep is deep, and we may catch him by the hair and cast him down." And one of the fallen, whose name was Azazel, said, "Shall we kill them with fire or with cold?" And Lucifer spoke to him, saying, "Neither of these." "What then?" said the wicked angel. "With a great plague," answered Lucifer. And so it was. This refers to the Black Plague, the Black Death. So this is when the story takes place, and most of the story does not have the angels and demons. This is like a narrative setup for what's basically a wolf and cub story in its framework, set during the Black Death. You could call it historical fiction horror or historical fantasy horror, because there's definitely like monsters and demons and stuff in it. This is the same author of The Black Tongue Thief, so a lot of you would recognize that book. I loved this book so much. It comes highly recommended to me, and the people who recommended it to me, I praised their recommendation after reading it. Personally, to me as well, the author Christopher Buehlman is a alum of Florida State, which is where I went to, so that's cool for me too. You can get this book by going to our website, ordering it through Audible, starting a subscription, or if you already have an Audible account, get it through there, or buy the book paperback, hardcover, through one of our links. That's what I did.
It's worth noting that anytime you go to our website and click on our Amazon affiliate link and then buy something, we get credit for it, whether it's what you clicked on or just the rest of your shopping trip. So if you're like buying a really big purchase, it's always worth going to our website first, actually.
Doesn't cost you anything extra. Yeah.
Anyways.
Let's move on. Pointing the finger. Ultimately, this becomes an example of the reader learning the truths, or at least having the clues and dialogue to reveal it. But again, the characters and world do not necessarily know either. A couple of examples similar that we want to compare this to. For example, one of them we discussed more recently on the podcast was the murder of Kevin by Varys. We did a whole episode on that. And of course, there's no question whatsoever who did this one. We're pretty sure it was the Spearwives, but there may be a little bit of doubt, and maybe a little bit of doubt with Walder, but there's no doubt Varys killed Kevin. We saw it. But so much of the question is, why did Varys do it? And what are the characters in the world going to believe about who the murderer is? Because they're not going to think Varys. So who does it get pinned on? That's the same thing here. Lots of people get it pinned on them or get suspected, but we learn the truth while the characters do not. Another example that's maybe a different kind of example is the first murder mystery in the entire series, which is the death of Jon Arryn. We're just told an outright lie that we have no reason to doubt so early in the story that Catelyn believes, so both readers and characters are fooled by that one. Later we find out the truth, and the Starks don't, except for maybe Sansa, right? So there's a lot of different ways George does this, and each one has its own narrative aspects to it that make it unique, but there's still some things in common. So there are, as is the case fairly often when we learn the truth, but other characters don't. Theon's escape from Winterfell means we lose sight of what happens, right? Again, the Pink Letter issue comes up. What happens? They survived and were tortured. What else happened? Point being, there's uncertainty in that. We don't know what really happened, especially with all the theories about who actually wrote the Pink Letter. So maybe they learned who committed the murders, except for the Walder murder. They won't know about that. But that would be peculiar. We should consider that possibility for a second, that they tortured the truth out of them. And the truth is that they didn't kill that Walder, which means they might be like, we tortured them viciously and brutally, and they still didn't cop to that murder. So maybe it wasn't them. They admitted to the other ones. So that is an interesting little point there. Maybe Ramsay is left to wonder about that. Maybe Roose is. Maybe Ramsay just ignores it, but Roose might be a little more thoughtful about it, a little concerned. But most likely, the women get blamed for that one. They're not going to be able to convince Ramsay or Roose or the torturers that it wasn't them. They just look so guilty, right? They're trying to steal Arya. They killed other people. Like, how are they going to convince anyone that it wasn't them? Theon didn't believe them. He's like, Theon was still pushed out. He's like, nah, I don't believe you. You did that. Hostine Frey pointed the finger at Wyman Manderley. He was wrong, but he was close because Wyman did kill those other three cousins. He has a fantastic reason to suspect Wyman, but I'm 99.9% sure Wyman had nothing to do with any of the murders inside Winterfell, and 100% sure he did the pies. There's no question there. But even if he doesn't know who's doing it, he's like, yeah, I'm glad. Whoever's doing this is doing a great job. Whoever's messing with the Boltons and the Freys, bravo. I don't know who you are, but thank you. He's happy to see the Bolton-Frey alliance fray at the edges, shall we say. And he's also not bothered by the blame. He's not bothered by Hosteen. Well, he is, as soon as Hosteen slashed his throat, he's bothered by that. But he's like, you have no proof. You got nothing. You can't, you have no physical evidence. You have no idea. Like, my lies, my truths, are plausible. And look at it from his point of view. Look at it from Wyman's perspective. He knows no one believes him, and he doesn't care. but he knows it's not him, even as he's sort of semi-admitting it, like taking the heat. So he's got to wonder who it really is, right? Who is killing these? I'm taking the blame, but who actually is doing this? Who is that? That brings us back to the possibility that he actually does know. Maybe he actually coordinated a little bit with Mance and the washerwomen. I tried to find evidence of any of that. There's really nothing. They don't even arrive at the same time. Or if they do, it isn't stated. We just, one day they're there. Abel just shows up, We don't get a lot of detail as to who he arrived with or just arrived alone. And it's kind of implied he arrived alone with just the 6 women. Even Big Walder thinks it was Wyman, though, like, as far as the other ones. Big Walder says, yeah, Wyman killed those 3. It's what I would have done if I was him. So he's like, yeah, I would have killed them like I killed my cousin. Oh, never mind. Like, that, another red flag from that kid. So it's not as big a lie as the one Jared, Simon, and Rhaegar told about Robb Stark. I love that one. Like, yeah, he turned into a wolf. But even Wyman pretended to believe that to keep up appearances. And so now he's turning it on their face. Like, yeah, you guys told outrageous lies and I was forced to believe it. How's that turnabout for you? So, but even if he, let's say he does know that the Spearwives did the other murders, he still wouldn't know about the Walder murder. He'd still might be like, huh, that's interesting. Who did that one? A lot of times with mysteries, we do our best to show all the evidence and offer multiple options or theories. But in this case, going through the evidence leads to very strong conclusions that really don't leave a lot of room for other alternatives. However, I'm open to theories from you all. If you have ideas, if you think I missed something, especially if there's evidence I'd missed, that can change the whole picture. One piece of evidence can change the outlook on an entire scenario, right? Now, except for the Walder murder, all of these killings have something in common, which is that none of the victims appeared to struggle. Let's go back to that piece of evidence. There's no sign of any of the first 4 deaths saw it coming. 2 died of exposure, it seems. Another was pushed off a wall. And another was killed from behind with a blunt object. The flint crossbowman had his head caved in, right? And if they sabotaged those stables, well, no one saw that coming either. Least of all the 2 grooms who were crushed to death. So that really speaks to deception rather than, a fight. There's no evidence of a fight. There's clothes are off. And the clothes being off is just such a tell. Like, it should raise huge suspicion. Like, it really speaks to that. Like, nothing tricks men quite like an offer of sex. What I mean by that is that it's one of the most reliable offers you can make to a man, not all men, but to a man that won't raise suspicion. It should raise suspicion. It's crazy. What? You're coming up to this woman, and this woman comes up to you in the snowstorm while you're on guard duty and is like, hey, let's hook up. You should be suspicious, but almost every man is going to be like, well, let's see where this goes. Let's see what happens. The offer of sex is just, your brain is going to either shut off or entirely or partially. The brain power that should be operating in terms of red flags, this is suspicious, is too busy raising a different sort of flag down below. Fat pink mast, right? Now, of course, not all men are sex-crazed dummies. Don't mistake me for saying that. These are men living under near extreme conditions. These are men who haven't been with a woman in a long time, probably. Some of them maybe not at all, ever. So the thought of escaping the paranoia, the fear, just for a minute, just for a moment's peace and pleasure, just to get your head out of that space for a moment, it's so tempting. It would be like, yes, please give me some relief from all this, even if it's just 10 minutes, 5 minutes, whatever. a lot of the men would be drinking a lot, right? And that's the more easy thing to indulge in, a more ready source of a way to escape and forget. And that might be who the free folk women look to target. Find the drunk men. You know, they're even less likely to suss out the suspicion. They're even more likely to fall for this trick. They're even more horny probably when they're drunk, right? So, I mean, who else could get grown men outside in this cold without leaving a mark? They're the only candidates. Like the hooded man can't do that. Theon in a disassociative state can't do that, right? I can't think of anyone who could do that except a woman trying to seduce these guys. It's really the only thing that fits, right? Like, I want to go do it out in the snow. Wouldn't that be? We'll keep each other warm, that kind of thing. Just so many teasing, seductive things you could say. Or just go to the man who's already on guard duty. Let me warm you up, right? Or if the guy balks, say, play on his pride. Say, oh, is it too cold for you? No man's going to say it's too cold for me when there's a woman flirting with him. You're going to say, I can handle that, So there's the best evidence for this comes during the rescue. It's an example of this concept or this method of murder through seduction. So it's in the moment, it doesn't necessarily look like one because it's a very tense situation, but you see what I'm talking about. I've built you up to this. Now let's hear it. Here's the quote.
"You poor boys must be freezing," said Holly. "Here, let me warm you up." She slipped past the guard's spear point and reached up to his face, pulling loose the half-frozen scarf to plant a kiss upon his mouth. And, as their lips touched, her blade slid through the meat of his neck just below the ear.
It's blatantly obvious that a man couldn't have done that, not that way. I mean, he could have maybe killed this guy, but not like that. If some man tries, he's like, why are you trying to get back? Like, he wouldn't have gotten past the spear point. He's like, stop that, get away. And so this really makes my point, I think. There's no rational reason why Theon or anyone would bring sex workers outside to guards on duty. But he wants to believe it's true. He wants to believe it. In that moment, he's like, yes, please. And he's not necessarily suspecting, even if he's suspicious, he isn't necessarily suspecting murder, right? They might be trying to do something here, but he's not, his head probably won't go to they're trying to kill me. He might though, because of the paranoia around there, but this is one of the best ways to alleviate that paranoia, to turn it off for a moment, just long enough to stick a dagger in your neck. And there's a great parallel moment at the end of A Clash of Kings involving another guard, a Bolton man, so similar, and involving the ghost in Harrenhal, Arya, a man who wants to believe this guard. But again, a guard who shouldn't believe, even though he wants to, and it results in a death just like this last one. Very similar. Quote, "Silver, you say?"
He did not believe her, but he wanted to. Silver was silver, after all.
"Give it over, then."
Her fingers dug down beneath her tunic and came out clutching the coin Jaqen had given her. In the dark, the iron could pass for tarnished silver. She held it out and let it slip through her fingers. Cursing her softly, the man went to a knee to grope for the coin in the dirt, and there was his neck right in front of her. Arya slid her dagger out and drew it across his throat, as smooth as summer silk.
Just replace that line, silver, with sex. He did not believe her, but he wanted to. Sex was sex, after all. Give it over, then. Right? So you can easily replace that word, and it still fits beautifully. Oh, maybe not beautifully. It's kind of gross, but it still fits well. So, again, even if they're suspicious, they'll hesitate, and that hesitation is all that it takes. All you need is that 1 second to get that knife in the throat. So Holly did that one really quickly, but remember what we pointed out earlier, none of the other murder victims were actually stabbed, except for little Walder, but he's obviously a different case. The other 2 died of exposure, so probably a similar situation. Teased, flirted, gets them out of their clothes a little bit, then knocks them out, drugs them, who knows, then leaves them in the snow, and that kills them. The man who fell off the wall? Something similar to that, maybe. Gets him to sit on the wall or lean on the wall, then whoops, shove him off. Maybe his pants are down around his ankles or something, so he's off balance, Or maybe there's just 2 or 3 women there, and they just triple team him, They act like they're flirting or whatever, and he's distracted, shove, you're gone, falling off the wall. And that's the same deal with the guy whose head was caved in from behind. Picture one girl distracting him, another one, bam, right on, back of the head. Simple. Right? Very simple. And these are free folk women who live hard. They do things like climb the wall, right? These are raiders. These are tough women with most likely have combat experience. And a few of them are on the older side, so they've seen some things. And they were handpicked by Mance Rayder. He's not bringing the B team on this mission. He's bringing the best he has. The ones that know how to keep quiet, who won't balk at these murderers, who are not afraid of Ramsay, that's a tall order, right? And again, if you want another example, so these are the 6 women are badasses, Rowan, Myrtle, Holly, Frenya, Willow, Witch-Eye, and I forgot the last one. Anyway. And if you want another example of seduction leading to a murder, Arya in the Mercy chapter. Same thing. He should not have left with her. The other guards, you shouldn't do this. He also wasn't thinking murder, though. But that is what happened. Arya stabs him, and it's all comes back to a clash of kings and right around Harrenhal. It all comes together. So here's a little outro section for you. After Theon and Jane jump, they're found by none other than Crowfoot Umber. He is rightly skeptical that Jane is Arya and begins to quiz her. She gets the first 2 questions right before they're interrupted. You know how George loves to do that, the interruption during a conversation. This one wasn't about to reveal lore, but it's still a familiar tactic. The gates open. The gates of Winterfell open while they're having this conversation, this quiz, and Crowfoot grins because he's set pit traps. His green boys dug holes, right? And covered them with snow. He was hoping to get Roose or Ramsay, but he got one almost as good. He got Aenys Frey, who broke his neck. Sir Hostian survived, losing a horse only, and it made him madder. So, good get by Crowfoot there, and it may really hurt the Freys because Aenys was their commander. Hostian, he's more of a fighter, more of a guy to follow into battle, not a guy to come up with a strategy though. He's great in the battle, but not at determining how it should operate and when it should happen and all these other things. Stannis called this man Sir Stupid. So it comes back to the line I alluded to at the very first sentence of this episode. When Stannis hears that Roose has sent out an army to attack him, he declares, Bolton has blundered. All he had to do was sit inside his castle whilst we starved. Right? That's what we said at the beginning. Not only does this tell us Stannis didn't send his own agents to Winterfell, because that wouldn't be true. Roose doesn't have to sit there. If Stannis was working to undermine Roose's position from within, he couldn't possibly make this claim. He's like, Roose could just sit there. Roose couldn't just sit there if you were having murders happen, So that tells us Stannis has no idea what's happening. Which reinforces the notion that the Stark loyalists haven't bothered to tell Stannis. I mean, not haven't bothered. It would be hard to tell Stannis, given they don't even know where he is. He's somewhere out in the snow. But if you were wondering if there was some possible communication there, doesn't seem like it. Doesn't seem like he knows. Even better, in terms of irony and confusion and story, Stannis doesn't know that the reason he has the Arya imposter, Jane, is the same reason Theon and Bolton blundered. It's mostly because of the Spearwives. He doesn't know that. They are the reason that Theon came here with this girl, but those 6 women that probably died are the ones most responsible, and that's kind of ironic. So, and their leader is Mance Rayder, who Stannis thinks he burned alive. So, a man Stannis thinks he killed just did a great service for him, and it might have gotten him captured by Ramsay and tortured by him, which is, what a twist that would be, though, for Stannis to learn that the man he thought he burned to death actually did a really great service for him. It might actually, if Mance survives somehow, it might actually Stannis might actually give him some mercy. Of course, we know how Stannis operates. The good act doesn't wipe out the bad, but this is a very good act, and maybe he'll cut his fingers off and give him a castle in the Rainwood like Davos. And there's other rewards for the families of his squad, right? I mean, the Spearwives. Like those again, if they're all dead, then their kin deserves something in light of that, in lieu of that, especially if they really were flayed. Because, damn, they really paid the ultimate price there. And Theon does tell Asha about Mance in the washroom. So at least one more person knows that is what really happened. It may not spread, that story may not get out widely, but there's a chance for it to, given more people talk about it. So Mance may not survive to claim a reward from Stannis. Stannis may never even learn that Mance did this service for him. Now, to be fair, Mance wasn't doing it for Stannis. He's doing it for himself. But it was a service for Stannis. Like, it was absolutely for him, even though that wasn't Mance's endgame. And what has Stannis said many times? It's a king's duty to reward good service and pay his debts. He says that to the Tyrashi banker during that scene where Theon's hanging from the wall there. Mance and Dalla's son could receive the reward due to Mance, right? Maybe that's how Stannis would do it, right? If he can't reward the father, he would reward the family, and that's the only family. Dalla's dead too, right? She died in childbirth. But another twist. That's not Mance and Dalla's son. It's Gillian Craster's son. But maybe that baby swap will be reversed in the long run. Because Jon did it because he was worried about Melisandre burning the King's Blood baby. If that threat is removed, Jon could reveal the truth. It's like, we can swap him back now. Now that Melisandre's not going to burn a baby, we can undo that subterfuge. But what if a lot of time has passed? It's weird. Anyway, it's just another level to all this that just shows the intricacies of George's writing and how great he is at tying so many plot lines together. I mean, there are a lot of connections between these plot lines that I'm sure you all caught when you read it the first time, and then another batch the second or third or fourth times, whatever. But I can pretty much guarantee that nearly everyone, if not everyone here, found new connections through this episode, as I did when writing it, right? I didn't know all these things going into this document, this episode, this topic. Learned a lot myself. So again, it just gives me more appreciation for George's ability to tie so many things together while it's like a juggling act. You got like 12 different plot lines, each interacting with each other in a different way, sometimes in subtle ways, sometimes in outward ways. I love it. Our trivia answer, the question was, one of Mance's spearwives is named Willow. What's her nickname? Willow Witch-Eye. That's cool, right? Witch-Eye. I like that name. That's very cool. Sounds fearsome. Unfortunately, she's probably dead. If you want to stay immersed in related topics to this, we've got 3 episodes on the Battle of Ice. We got 2 episodes on House Manderly. Especially part 2 is relevant. Part 1 is ancient history of House Manderly, and part 2 deals with current events as well as recent events. So that is very connected to this episode. And of course, Valar Rereadus for Dance with Dragons has a lot more thoughts from us and from Nina and I guess Joe Buckley as well, who we did that with back in the day. And I think we did a good job with that as well. If you haven't listened to it, or maybe you haven't listened to it since it came out, which is many years ago, 5, 6, I don't even know, 5, 6, 7 years ago.
Oof.
Maybe it's time for a re-listen. But whatever you choose...
Valar re-listen us.
Valar re-listen us, yeah. Whatever y'all choose, whether you can stay immersed today or whether you come back with us next week for more, we'll be here. We appreciate your patronage, your listenage, your watchingage, your telling your friendage, and all the people who help make this possible on the back end, like Nina Krusling, almost used her maiden name there. Nina Krusling, Joey Townsend, who wrote our music, Michael Klarfeld, maps in the intro, maps behind me. Yeah, claradox.de for his website, claradox.de. It's in the description. We'll see you next time for more. On behalf of Ashea, I'm Aziz. Valar Rereadus.